Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call a regular council meeting for Monday, July 20th, 2020 to order at just before 6:15 p.m. Welcome to councillor colleagues. I have Councillor Garnett on my right and Councillor Rintoul on my left joining me in the council chamber. And via video conference, we have Councillors Wainwright, Fallett, Duncan, and O'Keefe. And good evening to speakers and presenters this evening as well. I'll apologize to those who may be viewing this video recording after the meeting, that we tried for approximately 15 minutes to have this meeting webcast and are unsuccessful as of this moment. We understand that this meeting may become webcast, but we apologize for that technical challenge, which we have not had in previous, but we are assured that this meeting is being recorded. I would turn to our call to order resolution, please.
Council is holding this meeting without the members of the public in attendance and will continue to do so until further notice due to the limited size of the council chambers and the inability to meet social distancing requirements and ensure public and staff safety. And Council is ensuring openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability by allowing the public to submit written correspondence, participate by means of electronic communication, by recording, and by live streaming when available this meeting.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? The motion carries. Thank you. I'd now like to acknowledge that we're having this evening's meeting in the traditional territory of the Wisanic First Nations. And I would look for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or additions? Councillor Duncan.
I'd like to raise item 16.8 to new business.
Sorry, I'll just... Sorry, I just didn't catch that number. Was it 16.8?
16.8, yes.
Okay, Councillor, thank you. I will raise that to correspondence under 14D. And I'll also note that we do have 2 reports from councillors this evening as well. So, motion as amended?
As amended.
Second.
All those in favor? The motion carries. Thank you. Now I'd like to move to public participation. We have 3 participants joining us, or we have 3 participants for public participation today. We have Sandra Scollard, which has submitted an email which she has requested be read aloud, and I now turn to Mr. Humble to read that, and we'll follow that by Mr. Denny Jelena and Mr. Alistair Mackay. Mr. Humble?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is an email letter dated June 8th, 2020, and it reads as follows. Dear Sydney Council members, my name is Sandra Scollard. I live at 2559 Beaufort Road, which borders the public beach access on Beaufort Road. This access looks right out at Sydney Spit with all its wonders. I have lived at my current address for 30 years. My concern is that the tree overgrowths along the public beach access are overtaking the access, and it is not walkable for most people anymore. My neighbor's trees come halfway across the path. They are encroaching and canopying the public access with trees that are so aggressive that my gardener says those trees are banned in the UK. There is also a public tree planted right in the middle of the walkway near the water that is overgrown so big round that it is making it almost impossible to pass by it and get to the public beach. Only vigorous walkers can now use the path on one side only. Teachers used to bring groups of small children to the area and allow them to learn about beach nature. People used to come with their chairs and walkers, wheelchairs, and enjoy the view. It is no longer possible or passable to allow this, as it has become single file only. The trees are almost always in motion, and if you have allergies, the pollen is suffocating. I can't open my windows anymore for the pollen. The parkway sunlight is gone, the view is gone to walkers. Trees catch people's clothing and hair as they walk by. It is rare to see an actively aging person enjoying this wonderful park, since roots are climbing over now. And if they get to the stairs, people are funneled off in only one direction. Why? What if they want to go the other way towards the sun? They must climb over logs to double back instead of just emerging where they want to go. The Public Parks Department has entirely abdicated its responsibility to tree management here. And through turning a blind eye, these over-the-roof trees, public and private alike, have grown as high and wide as they want to grow. All tree owners have hidden the light and view from the public in an allergy-ridden narrow space. In general, Sydney taxpayers who support this beach access are now prohibited from its use because of the offending encroachment. The town of Sydney needs to step up for the public it serves instead of abdicating this nearby beautiful access for private use, which is tax-free to them. This spot is a 1 flat mile walk from Beacon Avenue, and it's expensed by the public treasury. These offending trees are being used for a fence. A fence is designated to be 4 feet tall along there. The city tree that smacks in the middle of the walkway is nearby, is nearly enveloped by private trees beyond the cyclone fence. Its roots are clear across the park and are passable only on one side by the hardy, who can get over the roots easily. A walker can't get them. Please save our public beach access. Children love it, parents love it. Our actively aging would love it if they could use it again. We pay the taxes for that beautiful, flat, low-level beach access, which is now being denied them. Bring it back to a suitable state, which means eliminating a bunch of trees. This site is unique to the area. It is a spit itself, looking out at Sydney Spit, boat races, land and sea animals, migratory and local birds. And the sun and moon are exquisite from there. This is not designated a forest. As I said, it is a natural spit, just like Sydney Spit. Why let it disappear to only the few? How can we let the public know that their pathway is dying like a crab in boiling water? How can we get the attention of the Public Parks Department so they will manage it again for the use of children and old and hardy alike? We don't want to give it to private property owners adjoining it, of which I am one. It belongs to everyone. If privacy is a private concern, then privacy screens should be considered. We can all participate in this unknown jewel amongst us. I have contacted the Parks Department about this for years. You need to let us, the public, broadly know what are your intentions for this public space, a space most people do not even know exists. You are giving it tax-free to the few who border it. As an aside, are trees substitutable for fences in Sydney, regardless their impact? Again, my concerns are private trees encroaching the public beach access. The huge tree in the middle has to go. The stairs need to be upgraded. They are useless on higher tides. They should go both directions. Thank you and sincerely, Sandra Scholar, 2559 Beaufort Road, Sydney, BC. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humble, for reading that. And if Ms. Schollard is viewing this recording after the meeting, we thank you for bringing your concerns to our attention at Council and to staff. Staff will review the details of your letter and provide a response in writing. And that response letter will come back to Council after it is issued to yourself. So thank you again for that input. We certainly in Sydney all want to share the public spaces as much as we can. I'll now turn to Mr. Denny Jelena, who is joining us by Zoom. Mr. Jelena, you have approximately 3 minutes. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. I live at 2545 Oakfield. I want to speak to you tonight about short-term rentals. I was disappointed with the outcome of the June 22nd Committee of the Whole discussion, where a bylaw amendment to prohibit new short-term rentals in Sydney was defeated on a tie vote. I think this decision should be revisited by Council for a number of reasons. I suggest that 1, Sydney put in a moratorium on any new short-term rentals, say for 3 or 4 years. 2, that existing short-term rentals, which are in compliance with the provisions of the current bylaw 2015, be grandfathered, as was recommended in, I think, the staff report. And 3, that provisions governing B&Bs establishments remain unchanged or be addressed separately if required. On the moratorium, a number of factors are at play. The current COVID-19 pandemic is having a major impact on the retail, hospitality, and tourism sectors across Canada. It's not yet clear what the ultimate impact will be on Sydney, but I expect some of our local businesses may not survive. So until the impact of on the hospitality and hotel sectors is better not to create additional pressures on the hotel industry. Short-term rentals compete with more traditional forms of tourist accommodation, but the issue in hand is not about leveling the playing field. Traditional hotels, motels pay taxes at a commercial rate, and short-term rentals pay at a residential rate. No amount of tinkering on the margins will address that differential. STRs have an impact on the local housing market. Homes or condos that are purchased by investors who turn them into short-term rentals remove them from the housing stock. In the downtown core, 7 major condo developments are now under construction. A total of over 400 condos have been approved by Sydney over the last number of years. Many of these units will be coming on the market over the next 24 months. Units purchased as investments can always be put on the long-term rental market. Having owners and long-term tenants living in these units will help ensure that we have more feet on the street year-round. Buying at our local shops and frequenting our restaurants, our services, and other amenities that we offer in this town. Short-term rentals also contribute to the local economy, but not to the same extent as permanent residents. Unless action is taken today to control the number of new short-term rentals, especially in the downtown core, we risk missing an opportunity to sustain and grow the local retail and service markets, especially in a post-COVID world. A significant increase in new short-term rentals may also need to be taken into account as part of the OCP review. I would add that permanent residents and tenants contribute in other ways. They become part of the social fabric of our community, something we pride ourselves on very much in this town. And finally, a moratorium may not necessarily increase the number of affordable housing units. This issue was raised on the June meeting. In Sydney, as the price of these developments is largely market driven. Sorry about that. But this issue could be addressed in another forum. So that's the moratorium element of it. On grandfathering existing short-term rentals would address the concerns raised in many of the form letters sent to owners, these short-term owners, prior to the June 22nd discussion. But we should only grandfather those units that comply with the provisions of the current bylaw 2015. A quick look at many of these letters reveals that they do not appear to comply. Owners living in Victoria who own 2 units, for example. So any decision to grandfather needs to be accompanied by a stringent enforcement of the existing bylaw. There has been virtually no enforcement to date. If bylaws aren't enforced, then why are they in place? The town could also require short-term rentals to obtain a business license. We would then know how many short-term rentals we have, we would know where they are, and this would help us better respond to issues like parking, noise complaints, and safety. As I mentioned, Airbnbs or bed and breakfasts can be addressed separately if it's still required. So to conclude, I think there are solid arguments for adopting this 3-phase approach to short-term rentals in Sydney. 1, a moratorium on new short-term rentals. 2, grandfathering existing legally conforming short-term rentals. And 3, enforcing the current bylaw that would allow us to stabilize the hospitality sector over the short term. It would also give us a window, some time to look at how we want to deal with the short-term rentals over the long term in a post-COVID world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gelina. I will only note you raised a number of points, and we certainly appreciate those points. Council did several months ago request staff to increase enforcement, bylaw enforcement. And that has not been able to pick up due to the COVID pandemic. So when we passed that resolution to increase enforcement, we asked staff to bring back a report, which I believe the timing is this fall. And so it is looking to come back to council with a report with regards to enforcement. And we did speak to other possibilities for consideration, including licensing, when we were considering that bylaw change. So thank you again for your input. We appreciate receiving it, and look forward to having it come before council again.
Thank you.
And I'd like to turn to Mr. Alistair Mackay. Mr. Mackay, welcome back to Sydney Council. You have approximately 3 minutes to speak, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. With reference to R3 on tonight's agenda from the July 13th Committee of the Whole meeting, referencing Delta Victor 100296. Earlier today, I submitted up-to-date photos of my fence, which has been moved and reduced in height since the last set of photos that were submitted. The new photos show the full length of the fence height at 6 feet from my driveway at the west of the property to a point 3.2 meters from the southeast corner property line. This point is 7.5 meters from the 5th Street crosswalk. The plan is to have the fence reduced in that first part of the that's missing right now to the regular 1.2 meter height, just for continuity and provide sightlines. To have a lower fence than the 6 feet that I requested, my original request was for 1.9 meters. I had rounded that up, but I found that from last week's meeting, the 1.84 meter height is actually 6 feet, and the panels are actually 6 feet in height at that height level, so that's fine. This actually compromises our privacy and our safety on our patio, because we'd be fully visible whether we were sitting down or standing if we had the lower fence. The original hedge was 9 foot high and extended from 5th Street right to our driveway, and there was never any complaints. I reduced the height at the 5th Street end a couple of years ago to blend in with the hedge at the front. This hedge right now was 5.5 feet high, but is due to be trimmed when the weather cools a bit, as I don't want to cause any more problems to the hedging and cause it to die. Yet another problem, I suppose. When we removed the dying hedge on the south end of our property, and all this process started, I had some dialogue with the planning department. Their reasoning behind the preference for a hedge over a fence is that a hedge could be cut. The fence we have in place is made of wood, so it too could be cut quite easily. However, it would never grow from the 6 foot height or become unwieldy. I've seen several hedges in and around Sydney which are over 10 feet in height and do encroach on the sidewalks, but this seems to be acceptable. The original hedge was planted on town property. The sprinkler system was also installed on town property. This was not done by us, but we seem to be called to task on it. Regarding the red fence, it cannot be viewed from 5th Street as it is wholly behind the hedge and the fence. And if you look at the photographs that's submitted today, you will see that. I mean, if safety is a concern, which was mentioned last week at the 5th Street Orchard Avenue corner, I would suggest that trying to see past cars parked on the southwest corner of 5th Street cause more concern when driving from Orchard onto 5th. It's difficult to see through the windows of any car parked there, as vehicles coming from the roundabout sometimes drive quite fast and more than the suggested 30 km/h limit. While looking north at the same intersection, there are clear sight lines, even 2 to 3 car lengths back from the solid white line on Orchard Avenue. One of the main reasons for that is that there are no parking right in front of our house on 5th Street, because it's right by the crosswalk. Another part in the suggestions to council is part 3 on the recommendations. I don't think getting a survey completed is really required, as the marked iron pins are now readily available on the property, and that's thanks to Kevin Weber from the planning department, a planning technician with you folks. He informed me where to look for these and what to look for, because I had no idea what I was looking for. But thanks to Kevin, I was able to locate them and get the actual property line that we needed. I think that's all I've got to say on this, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mackay. We will be considering the item later on in the agenda this evening. I'd now like to bring public participation to a close, and we'll turn to item 4C, our presentations. And we do have a presentation this evening from Ms. Emily de Rosenroll, CEO for South Island Prosperity Partnership. And with regards to regional recovery, good evening, Mr. Rosenall. You have the floor.
Great, good evening. Am I able to share my screen
Yes.
for PowerPoint? Okay. I apologize. I'm having an issue with my share screen right now. Is there somebody I can send the presentation to right now?
I'm just looking to staff.
And if not, if there's a second presentation, I can get this sorted and then come back to you. I apologize.
No, we understand. We've had our own technical challenges this evening. I'm just checking with staff, and we do just have yourself as presenting this evening.
Okay. Would I be able to get 2 minutes just to sort that out?
Yes.
Okay, my apologies.
Is share screen enabled? She should be able to do that last time. I think you just gave her everyone. Are we sharing our screen?
Emily, are you still on audio with us?
Yes, I'm just trying to get my other laptop because there's my issue with a frozen PowerPoint right now. So I'm just going to load it up. It'll take me probably 60 seconds just to power it up.
Well, that's fine. We just confirmed that we did enable sharing.
Okay, perfect. Okay, 60 seconds. Sorry about that.
I love technology.
Hi, okay, I got my technical support is my husband tonight, so apologies, but I'm ready to, the screen is unfrozen now. So I will share my screen and get going.
Okay, as we did discuss before the meeting, you do have 10 minutes, and we will start that from now. So thank you. Plus
Okay,
questions,
perfect. There we
Q&A.
go. Okay, great. Well, first of all, I'm calling from Esquimalt today, so I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I am lucky enough to live and work in the traditional lands of the Lekwungen people, today known as the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations. And thank you all very much for allowing me to be here with you, at least virtually, and make this presentation. So I'm aware that you were recently, you had a presentation from Bruce Williams before in about February. So this isn't a very long overview of our recent activities over the last 12 months, but rather really the last 3 months or so. Okay. So just a quick reminder, who is South Island Prosperity Partnership? And I know that you're all very familiar. We're over now 66 members. And that includes public and private sector members, 11 local governments, 9 First Nation communities now, where we started from 2, 3 post-secondary institutions, 9 industry associations and nonprofits, and over 30 major employers. And of course, Sydney was one of our founding members, and we're extremely grateful for that continued support and partnership. So I think that some of the strength of our model is really based on the diversity of our membership. And as you can see here, it's a group that really spans all the sectors, all the regions of the South Island. We now also have Souk on board, and all 5 chambers of commerce are now also members. So we're really thrilled about that. We're probably the most diverse model in all of Canada, certainly in British Columbia. So even recently, actually, we won the gold medal for from the Economic Development Council, International Council, for our diversity of our governance model. So our mission is really to facilitate and promote development of an inclusive, productive, and resilient economy on the South Vancouver Island. So we were first established back in 2016 when our region did not rebound as quickly from the last Great Recession of 2008-09. And so the folks at that time really looked at what are people doing across Canada in order to prepare their regions and be more resilient and be more competitive, protect their local businesses, help them grow and thrive. So at that time, it was found that we were the only region in all of Canada not to have a significant or a substantial investment in economic development. And since then, we've taken huge strides. So we help create a more collaborative region and a vibrant place to live, work, and do business. And we do that by promoting and facilitating the development of an inclusive, productive, and resilient economy on South Vancouver Island. So I'd like just to tell you a little bit about how long we've been in existence. That's just over 4 years now. Because we're coming up to our first five-year time period, we have initiated something called our organizational review. And we're doing that with a membership-based committee who is working with an independent evaluator in order to look at some of the chief accomplishments, also the areas of efficiency, areas for improvement, areas where we've gotten the most traction, really taking a look at that and helping provide some guidance over the coming years. And so as part of that process, we've interviewed 19 of our stakeholders and interviewed 22 members, excuse me, in order to find out exactly where the organization should be directing itself in the future. And so far, there's a perception of around 3 major areas, generally agreed upon that SIP is making progress in achieving impact in supporting economic development and awareness in the region. 2, there is the need for regional economic development, coordination, and collaboration, and SIP is effectively fulfilling this role. And 3rd, economic development is a very long-term proposition, and many significant outcomes will be measurable in 10 years or more out in the future. So here's just a reminder of our purpose that was established by our founding members, and it's part of our constitution and our bylaws. And this is what the organizational review will look at, the targets that we've established in these particular areas to see what the impact has been to date. And just a reminder of what those are: diversify the regional economy, promote better employment opportunities, and increase quality of life for citizens, raise the region's profile as a location of choice for new businesses. 3, work collaboratively with First Nations to achieve economic reconciliation. 4, maximize federal and provincial funding for regional economic development. 5, provide support for entrepreneurs and businesses to increase their ability to prosper and create jobs. And 6, collaborate with municipal economic development and regional trade association initiatives. So at our upcoming AGM, we hope that you'll all make it and be able to do a sort of Q&A with the independent evaluator. And that's going to be on September 9th, 2020. And the event will be digital, so I hope you all can make it. And now I'm just going to move into some of the major initiatives that we've been undertaking over the last 3 months. So a very big part of our focus, of course, has been the current recession that we're all enduring right now. And as you probably know, Greater Victoria is actually one of the hardest hit by this recession, given the high dependence we have on tourism and also related fields like retail, restaurants, hospitality, travel, and so forth. And in fact, the Conference Board of Canada has noted that we're one of the top 5 communities and cities in Canada that are worst impacted by our strong dependence on these sectors. And so SIP, since about April, has proactively worked with partners, worked as quickly as we can to launch something called the Rising Economy Task Force. And that's in order to coordinate a strong local response to the economic crisis created by COVID-19. So it's the largest coordinated industry-led recovery effort in BC and from all I can find in Canada. And we're working with 11 sector committees that have been formed to inform a very robust recovery strategy. And that recovery strategy will be released in November at our Rising Economy Week, and we'll send you details on that. So those 11 sector committees are working through some detailed situational analysis work. We've conducted over 250 surveys to different businesses in the community, really trying to uncover where are the ongoing vulnerabilities going to be, where are the opportunities to really shift from relief to recovery, and then therefore build greater resilience. And so how to do that as optimally as possible. That's really the major plan here. It's going to be a regional plan that will accelerate our recovery efforts through inclusive growth, of course, with a focus on regional resilience. So we'll tell you more about this in the coming months, and hope you stay engaged in this process. You've already been extremely engaged, and I have a slide about that as well. So just to give you a sense here, these are the different committees, Rising Economy committees. Really, it's the spectrum of the most important sectors that really drive our regional economy, and you can see how much these impact Sydney. Very, very important sectors. So tourism, arts, culture, sports and rec, I won't list them all, retail services, restaurants, ocean and marine, real estate and construction, education and skills, finance and capital, travel and transportation, technology, and we also, of course, have a municipal partners committee, which has been established to really make sure that we're still engaging in the vision creation. We're really engaging our municipal partners because that's a very important part of SIP, the way that we work through SIP and work with our partners. I'll also just highlight here the Indigenous economy and the inclusive economy are groups that are really taking a look across the sectors to look at opportunities for those different groups. So whether it's underrepresented groups in the economy or nonprofits in the inclusive economy committee or the Indigenous economy, taking a look at how do we ensure that we're optimizing our recovery so that we don't leave people further behind than they already are. So that's a major focus for us as well. I'll give you a sense here of where we are in terms of our timeline. The beginning, we've already done the establishing the leadership. So I think you're probably aware through our newsletters that we have over 120 members that are engaged through our task force work and our committees. So they're all actively meeting. The committees are meeting every 2 weeks for a significant part of their day to be able to help us with this thought leadership work. The task force itself meets monthly. The partners committee meets once every 3 weeks. So we're certainly grateful for this major thought leadership that we have here in the region, and grateful that it's come together so quickly. We've also, we're about wrapping up our situational analysis work, which is a sort of deep dive and an assessment of the different sectors. And now we're working through future casting in order to come up with recommendations for ideas, actions, projects, and initiatives that can be launched in the next 12 to 18 months in order to really accelerate our economic recovery. So the name of the game is shovel-ready projects or shovel-worthy projects in order to really get ourselves out there as quickly as possible. Of course, we all know there's going to be stimulus funding arriving to across the country, especially from federal government, but also from provincial government. And so we feel that it's incumbent upon us all to make sure that we are clear about where the opportunities are to be able to support our best recovery efforts. So there's quite a lot of work that we're doing in order to raise that profile of what are the unique circumstances in Greater Victoria and how are we uniquely being impacted, and why is that story different from what's happening in Saskatchewan or Vancouver or Atlantic Canada or Ontario or so on. So the next piece is here on August 10th. We will have the committees finalizing their three-page recommendations. We'll have a general Q&A session with the task force where they can ask committee co-chairs for information on their thought process. And then the task force itself will begin to look at those opportunities that are across the different sector committees and start pulling together what's bubbling up to the top, what will unlock the most potential for the whole region, what will unlock the most potential for multiple sectors, and really start connecting the dots between them. So that's sort of up next, where we've set up a working group to help really dive into the vision for recovery, set up priorities, goals, and metrics to measure our progress going forward. And that group meets in September. And then finally in October, we'll develop the final strategy. And that will be released to the public in the Rising Economy Week, which will be November 16th to the 20th. And so we hope to get as much participation as possible from all of the counselors during that week. And they won't be all day events. They'll be probably about an hour and a half per day of content. We have lined up thinkers such as John Stackhouse, the former chief editor of the Globe and Mail, who now works with RBC. So he'll be looking at some broader trends for Canada and how we fit into that. We'll be looking at opportunities for the future. We'll be looking at our general positioning in this within all these global trends. So how do we actually now make these the way, how can we best adapt to put our best foot forward? We'll also hear from the different co-chairs of the different committees in virtual panels. So some progress going forward. As I mentioned, we've got a lot of people on these task forces and committees, and they're continuing to be engaged and likely be engaged for the rest of the year on project implementation. In the last month alone, we've had about 24 meetings of the different committees. Each committee has really created their own unique plan, so it's very clear how engaged they are. The situational analysis is completed, and now we're working towards those reports. So just to give you some sense of what we're seeing in terms of early traction and early successes, the different committees have come up with some opportunities that we're ready to actually start working towards implementation that we're already sort of earlier than the reports are ready. So one is an example, the new digital skills program for displaced workers. And that's a program that we're launching in partnership with Alacrity Foundation and the BC government to help take workers, particularly in tourism and retail, and be able to upskill them with digital literacy and digital marketing skills. And these are skills that are required across all sectors. So we're taking a look at how do we get more concern now with what are we doing with the workers while the opportunities aren't there, so that when they're ready to be reemployed, they're able to do that at a level that will give them a higher salary. And of course, that sort of goes back to our mandate, creating jobs that aren't just any job, but creating jobs that will push up that median household income and provide living wages. So second is a pilot we're working on with the restaurants and the BC government as well. And it's an app that's directed at creating more confidence for people in bricks and mortar organizations. So the idea there is that if you, as a consumer, you want to go to a restaurant, you can scan an app and you can find out how strictly they're adhering to this health and safety standards that are now required to be able to adhere to social distancing and increased hygiene and so on. So the idea is to really give consumers more confidence that there is a third party endorsement to a degree to be able to understand the differences and increase comfort, so that we're out there and we're again recirculating and spending our money in the economy. Thirdly, we're exploring funding opportunities right now. The committees are exploring these opportunities for what we call shovel-ready projects, like, for example, the Ocean Future Innovation Hub. And that's a project that was ready to go, largely to initiate the beginning phase, which is a proposal with the Western diversification And we've commenced already an RFP process to be able to look at that. And there'll be more in the coming weeks. I already know of a few more, but I'm not quite yet able to announce them. But stay tuned over the coming weeks for that. And then in government engagement.
Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes.
If you could wrap up perhaps in just a minute or so, and then we could go to questions and answers.
Sure, of course, yeah.
Thank you.
So here's a quick view of the government engagement we've done so far. The Prosperity Index is our annual flagship. We had to augment that this year, this publication, with a monthly recovery dashboard in order to see how we're actually coming through the recovery. And that we just released the first one last month. And lastly, I want to end with Sydney's vital role in the economic recovery. And of course, Mayor McNeil-Smith has been part of our task force and our partners committee and very active there. He's also going to be part of our working group to help formulate the vision and the goals and the metrics and so forth. So thank you very much for that. And of course, at the committee level, we've been highly engaged with stakeholders and businesses in your region. And this is an example here: the Association of BC Marine Industries, Sydney Pier Hotel, Saanich Peninsula Chamber, the Sydney BIA, and then various financial institutions in your region. And they're all actively participating in this committee work. So thank you. Before I go, I of course want to say we're deeply grateful for the leadership. You're one of the smaller municipalities of the region, but not shy at all on big thinking and big ideas, and a vital part of our recovery. So grateful and honored that we can do this work. And I'm looking forward to questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'll open it up to councillors, council colleagues, if you have questions for Mr. Rosenthal. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. So I believe you mentioned that your subcommittees have been meeting. They will be providing recommendations by August 10th in terms of, I presume, what needs to be done, or potential activities. And I'm wondering how municipalities like Sydney and others would feed into that. Like, what sort of input do we need to give our representative in order to get our voice heard in those recommendations?
Well, actually, you're even higher level than that. Mayor McNeil-Smith, through the task force and also the working group, is really formulating the filter itself. So how are we going to figure out which are the most important regional projects that will come to bear? So that's really helping steer all of the priorities that we're working on. And is that, maybe there's another part to the question? Are you wondering about involving in the committees themselves, or?
No, I'm just, wondering about what is ultimately going to be done, and how each, the process of how each community provides their input into that. So I guess what I'm thinking about is, we have a local task force, we have an economic advisory committee sort of looking at this sort of stuff. And so it sort of makes sense that they should be discussing these things locally. And if there's things where we want to leverage the power of SIP, that we would need to get those things into SIP or considered, it sounds like by August 10th.
Those are the reports of the various committees. So maybe if there were specifically groups you want us to reach out to, I'd be happy to do that and just see how we can collaborate. There's different recovery sort of groups at the municipal level occurring. In Colwood as an example. I can't remember which other ones. Colwood we've been engaged in. So we'd be happy to just collaborate. I think that makes the most sense. We're not sitting on a big grant or something and doing a call for proposals and then the idea comes through. It's really like, how can we, by working together, how do we maximize our opportunities for being able to attract that sort of investment? But some of it's also, what can industry itself do to help speed up the recovery? What can organizations like ours do? What can municipalities do? What can the provincial government, the federal government do? So the recommendations are going to be a mixture of maybe ideas around policies. Some will be about projects and initiatives. And you'll see, I think, a real mix of ideas that come out of that.
Okay, yep, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Emily de Rosenroll, for your presentation this evening. It's been a pleasure to participate and see how nimble the organization has been to put 120 plus individuals representing key businesses, institutions, and having provincial and federal government task force representation on the committee as well. And we look forward to presenting the work going forward to the municipalities. And it's great to see that we have other business representations such as the Pier Hotel and others participating. Our executive directors of our two business associations participating at the committee level to contribute. So thank you very much.
Great, a pleasure to be here, and thanks so much for your time and the opportunity to talk. Apologies for the technical, we had many technical difficulties tonight, so apologies for that.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. I'd now like to turn to Section 5 under bylaws, and we have bylaw number 2199 regarding service connection fees and charges, amendment number 1, and a report from staff dated July 14th.
I'll move bylaw 2199 be introduced and read for the first time.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries.
I'll move second reading.
Second.
Discussion. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm just looking for a little more clarity from staff on the nature of the cost increases, where they originate from. So I'm wondering, is it the cost of the meters from the manufacturer, or is it, I'm not sure whether we hire an outside company or consultant to install those, or whether it's staff costs internally. So if they could comment on that. And I guess where I'm also kind of going with this is I'm thinking about how we're changing the rules for multifamily buildings, which comes up later in the agenda, about the adding a meter front and multiple meters. So I guess what I'm wondering is the potential additional costs is going to be one thing. And then my follow-up to that would be whether, if the costs are significant, is it possible, or do we already provide sort of a reduction on the cost for meter installations when they're all in one place?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to staff.
I'll respond through Mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. The increase in cost is based on actual, we've seen a significant cost increase of those, in particular those 2 meters, 1.5 and 2-inch meters, just from supplier costs. So that's the reason for the change in the fees. And the bylaw amendment is being proposed is that it's established as actual costs to purchase that meter and install, as the case may be. There's different scenarios on how those meters may go in. Often if they're going in the boulevard, that's town staff installing those meters. So we'd be just looking at the cost recovery. On occasion, they do go in, may go in a building, and that may be installed by the building's plumber or a contractor. So in this case, the cost to that applicant of getting that meter would be strictly for the town supplying that meter. Oh, okay. And so I presume in a new multifamily building, the cost of the actual meter is never going to change. It is what it is. But would there be less cost for installations if it was taking, I guess, less time because they're all in one place rather than a number of meters in separate places? Yes, to Mayor, to Councillor O'Keefe, by having one bulk meter looking ahead of in the future item on the agenda here, with going to a bulk meter, obviously installing just one meter is much more cost effective in terms of time, of that installation cost versus doing multiple meters. In the case where it was multiple meters, the town staff wouldn't be actually installing those meters. It would just be supply, some material cost. But with the case of the bulk meters going in the boulevard, that would be a town installation. And so the idea is just to recover the cost of any effort the town puts it into the work, as well as the cost of the meter itself.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Councillor. Other questions under discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
I'll move third reading.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We have no development permits or development variance permits under Section 5. I'll move to adoption of minutes. We have the minutes from 3 council meetings to be adopted, which we can do with one motion, and they are the regular council meeting of June 22nd, the special council meeting of July 7th, and the special council meeting of July 13th.
Second.
Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We have no items under Section 7, business not completed at a previous council meeting. Under Section 8, business arising from minutes, we have one item from our special council in-camera meeting of July 13th regarding town nominees for the Victoria Airport Authority Board of Directors. I'm pleased to read the resolution passed by council that the town renominate Charles Lavallo and Wendy Everson for the renewal terms. On behalf of council, I want to extend our appreciation to both of these Sydney residents for their service while serving on the VAA board during their previous terms. Moving to, we have no petitions or delegations. Under Mayor's report this evening, I have 3 items. First, I would like to read a statement with regards to the Happy Buddha cannabis petition. On July 15th, last Wednesday, the town of Sydney received the judge's decision on the Happy Buddha cannabis petition regarding its retail business license application. The case was heard in court in February, and the judge reserved her decision. The courts then closed due to the pandemic. However, they have recently reopened. On June 18th, prior to the judge releasing her judgment, the Liquor Cannabis Regulation Branch issued a policy directive called the Cannabis Licensing Regulation Amendment - Non-Transparent Walls. In the policy directive, the LCRB changed its requirement for non-transparent windows to allowing transparent windows, but specifying what cannot be visible in those windows from the outside. The town of Sydney then received a revised Happy Buddha cannabis application from the LCRB with a revised design including transparent windows. Council has not reviewed the application because the matter was still before the court with the judge. However, the town did advise the lawyer for the petitioner that council would consider the revised application upon the petition being withdrawn, the case being dismissed by the judge, or the judge issuing her decision. With the matter no longer before the courts, the town and council will now follow its statutory procedures to review the revised application at a future council meeting or meetings. And the process will include adhering to the judge's ruling that council must obtain views from the public and then submit its decision and a summary of those views to the LCRB. The LCRB will then decide whether to approve the application. The next item I have under Mayor's report is in the agenda, and that is I'd like to give a brief verbal report regarding the Beacon Wharf Select Committee, followed by a recommendation. Several weeks ago, Council established the Beacon Wharf Select Advisory Committee to bring forward recommendations by December 31st regarding the possible replacement or not of the current Beacon Wharf. Council established the committee's terms of reference and appointed me, Councillor Wainwright, Councillor Duncan, and 2 Sydney residents to serve on the committee. The committee will have its first meeting in the near future. However, due to my current schedule and workload, I'm wishing to step off the committee, and I recommend Councillor Rintoul serve in my place. I would ask Council to consider the 2-part recommendation in the agenda.
with a recommendation number 1, that the terms of reference for the Beacon Wharf Select Committee be amended to A, remove the mayor as a member and to add another member of council, and B, include the election of chair and vice chair by majority vote of the committee members, and 2, that Councillor Chad Rintoul be appointed to the committee.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Third and last item I have this evening is I would like to read a letter on behalf of Council with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic, the town of Sydney, and in particular our Emergency Operations Centre. The letter dated today is addressed to Mr. Randy Humble, Chief Administrative Officer, Mr. Brett Mickelson, Fire Chief, Emergency Operations Centre staff, or those who served in the EOC, town staff, and our career and volunteer firefighters. Dear Mr. Humble and Mr. Mickelson, on behalf of Sydney Council, along with residents, businesses, and community organizations in Sydney, I want to extend our enormous appreciation to you both for your outstanding leadership as EOC directors of our Emergency Operations Centre team for the 111 days from March 12th to June 30th. Mr. Humble served the first 5 weeks, and Mr. Mickelson served as director for the remaining 11 weeks. Council also extends its enormous appreciation to the 21 town staff and 2 business community leaders who were part of the EOC, whether on a full-time or part-time basis. We are pleased to attach the names of all team members to the letter. We are also grateful to all town staff as they adapted in their town responsibilities to ensure the delivery of essential town services, while in many cases also backfilling for their colleagues while they assumed important EOC duties. Council also extends its gratitude to all staff that have been involved in the town's emergency planning for well over a decade. Thanks again to Mr. Mickelson, who has been the town's emergency planning coordinator for many years. The ability of the town to quickly get the EOC up and running, bring a group together in a separate physical location, and be effective with emergency response is a testament to the planning and the EOC training that was held, particularly after the opening of our new community safety building. Our community was and is extremely fortunate to have the new community safety building during this pandemic. Thanks again to Mr. Mickelson, who had input on the design of the building, and that it included the space and requirements to not only operate a significant emergency operations center, but that there are also the facilities to continue to deliver the important first response in day-to-day fire and rescue emergencies. To all our career and volunteer firefighters, we say thank you for your double duty on the pandemic and other emergencies. Through the regular updates from Mr. Humble and Mr. Mickelson at council meetings, we learned of the many effective response measures that were quickly implemented. To name just a few, EOC staff had daily contact with the senior care facilities in Sydney and regular contact with many of the stratas that house seniors to ensure safe protocols. A special mention to Denny Warner, ED of the Sandwich Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, and Morgan Shaw, Executive Director of the Downtown Sydney BIA, who enthusiastically agreed to become members of the EOC team. The Chamber, the Mary Winspear Centre, and the EOC worked to establish a critical supply chain rest stop at the centre, which garnered positive national media attention and thanks from the BC Trucking Association and truckers themselves. Both business organizations, with EOC staff, established critical communications with businesses during the rise of the pandemic and as the community came together to flatten the curve. EOC staff did wellness checks for the homeless in our community, daily wellness checks for the homeless in our community, and arranged, along with local businesses, to operate a shower facility close to the Lions Food Bank, which itself made extraordinary efforts to meet increased demand in our community. EOC staff were business liaison officers and have met with some 200 local businesses and all of our significant community organizations to ensure their protocols for serving the public are the best they can be under the public health orders. There were thousands of visits to the town website pages dedicated to daily updates during the most challenging period of the pandemic. The actions and communications from the EOC helped residents, businesses, and community organizations adapt, but they also contributed to the positive mental health and the confidence we had that our community was managing well through this crisis. Transitioning from response to recovery is an integral part of EOC operations. While the EOC began implementing various recovery measures shortly after the pandemic rose, In early June, based on the recommendation from the EOC, Council established a COVID-19 Recovery Task Force to continue this work. EOC Recovery Director and Senior Manager of Current Planning, Ms. Verhagen, and EOC member and Fire and Emergency Management Office Services Coordinator, Ms. Donna Barner, continue to support the task force in its work, which has 2 members of council and 7 community organization leaders as participants. And recovery efforts are planned to continue over at least the next 6 months. Council is grateful on behalf of the community for the recovery work that began in the EOC and the support to the task force. Our town vision is to be a welcoming and vibrant waterfront community with prosperous and resilient businesses, with engaging cultural and recreational activities, and with the provision of a broad range of essential and other town services. The COVID-19 pandemic impacted everyone in our community in ways that none of us could have imagined. Our community was shut down for over 2 months, and we then began a planned gradual recovery. Sydney Council is grateful on behalf of the community to Mr. Humble, Mr. Mickelson, the entire EOC team, town staff, career and volunteer first responders for your vital work and commitment in our time of crisis, and for helping bring us to the positive point we are at today. Council looks forward to its role in seeing our community become stronger, better, more vibrant, and resilient than ever before. Thank you. I'd now like to turn to council reports, and I'll begin with Councillor Fallett with the report on the Artsy Community Arts Council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. On June 25th was the first in-person meeting again with Artsy. We were all nicely social distanced, but it was nice to be back in a meeting face-to-face with people. So that was their first one since March. And they were scheduled to have their AGM in May. And of course, COVID has impacted that, and they weren't allowed to meet. And everything has been postponed according to legislation with the Societies Act. They are ready for the AGM whenever that will happen, but it's all been set aside until that such time. Artsy has been very, very busy in the interim, even though they've had to shut down their gallery and so many of the events that they normally put on. But one thing I will commend them on, not one thing, but one of the things that I want to commend them on is that they have come up with a COVID response plan, and that's it's in our agenda package this evening to take a look at. I think they've done an excellent job on putting that together, and also how Artsy is going to meet the community's needs. And one of the things that they're doing is, because they can't have the studio tour this fall as was planned, they've got a virtual artist tour, and they've got some art students from UVic who are filming visits to artist homes. 32 members in the arts community have agreed to participate. And so each week there will be another artist showcase. And if you go on to Artsy's website, you can click on the artist and go have a studio tour rather than the one in person. And then, of course, another thing that's going to be set aside during COVID is the Lantern Festival, which is in the late summer. And so we're going to be doing a week of lanterns. And there'll be online tutorials, workshops of how to build lanterns. So I urge people to go and check out the website and take a look at it. And hopefully we can look forward to a different type of lantern festival. And lastly, I just wanted to comment that they've done some really good PR work. Coast Capital has agreed to do art display in partnership with Artsy. And they've got their second artist exhibiting at the Sydney branch. And also the Shelburne branch will be taking artwork from the Artsy. So it's really pleased to see that. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fallett, for that positive report. Now I'd like to turn to Councillor Garnett on the Sydney Museum and Archives.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a very brief report. I participated in the board meeting for the City Museum and Archive Society on July 11th, and like Councillor Fallett, it was the first in-person meeting with very large social distancing. So it was well planned out and well attended. I just wanted to update council on the succession plan for the museum. Effective September 12th of this year, Mr. Peter Garnett will be resigning as executive director, and Miss Alyssa Gerwing will be leaving her position as assistant director to assume that role. Peter will be staying on in the role of assistant director at least 3 days a week for the next 6 months to assist in the hiring of a replacement and allowing for a smooth transition. It's also important to note that this change is being done within the existing budgets. On some positive side of it, the museum received UBC funding in the amount of $9,000 for the digitization of the Peninsula News Review. The new protocols for visiting the museum have been accepted well, with nearly every half-hour time slot being filled and approximately 40 people visiting a day. So they're doing quite well. And the Snapshots of Canada Traveling exhibit is now at the museum and open for viewing. So if you want to book a time, I plan to as myself, and I think it's going to be really worthwhile. It's a great picture history of the country. And lastly, congratulations to the museum, because they've been voted as finalists in 3 different categories for the Reader's Choice Awards in the Peninsula News Review. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, again for that positive report, and good to see that not only they're adapting in the current pandemic, but able to have a transition in the organization. Just a question: has there been feedback from staff at the museum that actually having to book an appointment has made people more committed in terms of visiting the museum rather than it just be kind of drop in with a volunteer donation?
They haven't really said that that's been an issue. They just basically wanted to provide the information that people are using it, and they seem to have adapted well to it, and their numbers are pretty steady. So they're happy with the way it's working, and they haven't given an updated total on how the donation aspect of it's doing, because that's part of the also part of the registering for the visit. But I'm sure when we visit again in September, I'll get a better snapshot of how that's working out and how their finances are doing to that extent.
That's great. Thank you. I do have one more council report from Councillor Rintoul with regards to the Economic Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I wanted to bring forward this item in part simply because council had referred to the EAC and made requests for recommendations at its meeting on Friday, July the 10th, and we haven't received the minutes from that meeting yet. I wanted to share with council on a timely basis the feedback from the committee. One of the items that came forward that is fairly specific that was referenced around the Build Back Better piece was the suggestion that there are some challenges in certain locations throughout the community with regard to internet service. And as we look to see more and more meetings such as this held online, held virtually, businesses evolving to provide their retail goods or services online, that we may not be as competitive as we could be in the absence of fiber optic cable in the community. And so that was one item certainly that resonated with the group. And I think in the context of other neighboring municipalities having internet service at that level of fiber optic, they felt that was something they wanted to keep or at least apprise council of for its consideration. The other aspect to that same piece around infrastructure related to cell phone transmission and how in some pockets of Sydney the service may be weaker than one would anticipate, and the signal bounced to the United States, and you're roaming inadvertently. And so those were 2 items. The specific recommendation reads that the committee recommend to council that the town set as a priority advocating on behalf of businesses for increased/improved internet and cellular capacity. So I'll introduce that item. And the other one was more general and I think more intended to complement the town in terms of its work to date. It reads that the committee recommend to council that the town keep costs down and limit demands on businesses during recovery. in that discussion period, it was acknowledged the town's efforts with respect to tax savings towards businesses and commercial enterprises in the town, and the committee certainly noted their appreciation with respect to that item. The other item, which is an ongoing discussion that I'll advise council of, relates to some of the business recovery efforts that the SBIA has undertaken, and an acknowledgement at least in terms of promoting Sydney businesses again, and I've seen a number of social media campaigns in this area. What a wonderful job the SBIA has done with respect to that. We did not have an SBIA representative on that meeting, and so that item was tabled for some further discussion to see if perhaps the town can piggyback in some of those efforts and perhaps even help supply the SBIA with some further support in their initiatives. And so I'll leave my comments there and happy to answer any questions of council if there are.
Thank you, Councillor Rintoul. I do have one, and in reading the minutes that we will be receiving shortly, it indicates that at that meeting, which was a lead up to the meeting you've just had, was that specific ideas would be gathered and forwarded to council. And so do you foresee the next set of minutes coming before council actually including specific recommendations to council or for council's consideration?
Yeah, correct. The items that I just brought to council's attention will be coming in the form of recommendations to the next committee minutes. Again, I wanted to make sure on a timely basis to deliver that insight to council in the event there's any action or questions that may want to be referred back to the committee.
Thank you. We do appreciate the update today and look forward to receiving those next minutes and recommendations. I'll move now to Section 12, Committee Reports. This evening we have 5 different committee reports, and for each I will turn to the respective council liaison for that committee. And so I'll turn to Councillor Duncan with regards to the Emergency Planning Committee meeting of June 17th. Councillor Duncan is just unmuting. There we go.
We're all having technical issues. Sorry, I'm just getting to that part in my little digital agenda here. So the liaison is Councillor Wainwright, and he was unable to make that one. So as the alternate, I attended, and this was, oh my goodness, June 17th. A lot of the business that was coming out was that there were drills that were postponed. EOC exercise that was supposed to happen on March 11th was obviously not done. There was a simulated tsunami inundation event that was planned and it's being postponed.
Councillor Duncan? Sorry, could I ask that you move receipt and then we'd be happy for you to give us an update or comment on the minutes or the meeting.
I'll move receipt.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a seconder. Please continue.
Sorry. Yeah, so the tsunami drill was postponed. A Resthaven Lodge evacuation drill has been postponed. A fire drill, RCMP fire drill, has not been scheduled, but there will be another one in 2020. And of course, Chief Mickelson was updating us on EOC activities. And Mr. Newcomb would like everybody to bring forward any emergency management issues to the OCP review. I guess the final thing was that the town of Sydney was successful in getting a UBCM grant for EOC training and infrastructure. So that is a nice piece of funding of $20,000 that goes towards our EOC, very timely. And the next meeting will be in the fall on September 16th.
Thank you, Councillor. Do colleagues have any questions of Ms. Duncan? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I'm wondering about, I noticed that one of the things that is on their things to do is the after action review and lessons learned in regards to the pandemic response. And I'm wondering how soon they might be doing that and whether we might have that for the fall is one sort of question. And then I guess I'm thinking about that possible second second wave, perhaps, that people have talked about in the fall. And if we have a sense of that we're well prepared to deal with that. I know that when we were at level 2, EOC staff did a great job in terms of educating businesses, dealing with the care homes, getting supplies and that sort of thing. So is there a sense that we're well prepared for that second wave, or are there things that we think we need to tweak a bit? If you're able to comment on that at all.
I would refer that one
Mr.
to
Humble?
staff.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor O'Keefe. So yeah, I anticipate a summary report on the EOC's response coming in the fall or thereabouts. That's being anticipated. And as Council's aware, one of the key items that the Recovery Task Force is looking at is lessons learned from the EOC, the town's response phase. And so we're in the process of that, and the idea is that we can look to potentially tweak elements of the response plan and make sure we're prepared for the second wave.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Councillor O'Keefe?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any further comment? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favour? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. I'll then turn to Councillor Rintoul for the Economic Advisory Committee meeting of June 19th.
I'll move receipt of the minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favour? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And then I'll turn to Councillor Fallett for the COVID-19 Recovery Task Force meeting of June 30th.
Thank you very much. Move receipt of the minutes.
Second.
Discussion, Councillor Fallett, did you wish to discuss it all, or any questions from colleagues?
Yeah, just a brief outline. We had our first meeting on June 30th. Mayor Clifton McNeil Smith was elected chair, and Stephen Duck of the Sydney Community Association is vice chair. And we had a good meeting, covered a lot of things, and it was our first meeting, so it was basically just sort of get ourselves up to steam. So we've got a task for the next meeting, and is to take the 3 sections out of the terms of reference: community recovery and resilience, cultural recovery and resilience, economic recovery and resilience, and for each member of the task force to come up with an idea of how we can move those items forward. So that is up for our next meeting at the end of this month.
Thank you, Councillor Fallett. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question. All in favour? Sorry, Councillor O'Keefe, did you have a...
Yeah, I did. Sorry.
Oh, please. Yep, go ahead.
Maybe my thing is delayed. I was just wondering, I was looking and reflecting on the SIP presentation, and I like that they had a timeline laid out about when certain things were going to happen. And I was wondering if we have a timeline laid out for our task force, and how soon we might see recommendations to come into council. And I guess I'm also reflecting on that, knowing that dozens of communities around the province launched their task force or recovery strategies months ago in some cases. And so, we're doing a bit of trying to catch up. And so I'm hoping that do we have a plan in terms of timelines established on how we're going to proceed?
Thank you for the question, Councillor O'Keefe. We had actually had a second meeting that the minutes last week, and the minutes weren't available for this evening's meeting. But we have set a process, as council colleagues will recall. There are 4 purposes within the mandate of the committee with regards to economic, cultural, resident, and then the question of if and when a second pandemic wave. And so at the next meeting, which will happen next week, representatives from the 7 community organizations and 2 councillors will bring forward specific ideas to be discussed in the committee within each of those 4 purpose areas, and that will then come forward to council. So at present, we haven't established, we're still finding our way with regards to a meeting schedule. It's partially been based on the information that's been received by the committee. They've received a lot of information recently, most recently, of course, the excellent results from the citizen survey, resident survey, and other information as well.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess my recommendation would be that we do have some sort of time frame set by the task force in the near future, so that we have some timelines or deadlines to move things ahead. So for the committee's consideration.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Any further discussions? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. And I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright, liaison to the OCP Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move receipt of the minutes of the June 18th and July 6th meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, there were two recommendations that came out of the July 6th meeting, but I note that those recommendations overlap the motion that was made by council that was tabled. So I think procedurally I need to start with lifting the matter from the table.
Certainly. And do we have a seconder for that?
Second.
All in favor? That motion carries. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay, so the motion that is now on the floor is the one from the council meeting. And the motion from the council meeting was that the 2021 fiscal year budget for the OCP review be increased to 100,000. And I guess the comments I'd make, we can deal with that particular motion, but the OCP Advisory Committee is recommending support for the four options that were identified in the staff report that is the basis for that particular motion. And the OCP Advisory Committee also supports an additional option, which is not included in that motion, but could be added as a separate item later.
Councillor, would you like to move forward with the first recommendation, which I think staff is in agreement with, and then we could consider the second?
Mr. Mayor, we've got a motion on the table. It's the one that was tabled from the council meeting. So that motion is that the 2021 fiscal budget for the OCP review and update project be increased to 100,000.
Okay, I acknowledge, Councillor, what you've said. In the staff report for this meeting, that recommendation was changed slightly, not in content, but in wording, to say an increase of 50,000, to make it clear that that was the what we were doing with regards to the increase to 100,000. I think just council being aware of that what we are considering tonight is by increasing the budget to 100,000, we're considering increasing the budget by 50,000. And the Appendix B to the report breaks out all of those, all of the detailed costs for the entire budget, but also for the costs for the additional 50,000. So I guess my challenge procedurally, Councillor, and I'll turn to staff, is that while the advisory committee have made recommendations that council will want to consider and vote, based on the decisions that they take on those two motions, could have an impact on the budget and how much we increase or don't increase the budget by. Whereas if we pass the motion, we've as read, we've in essence either accepted or not accepted the motions. We would then have to amend if the motions on the two recommendations from the committee changed. Councillor Wainwright?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the recommendation, the first recommendation from the OCP Advisory Committee is consistent with the motion that was tabled. So that increase of 50,000, or as it's worded, increasing the budget to 100,000, which is a 50,000 increase, that would allow including the 3 suites of infographics, the 2 extra days of land use and design charrette, the 4 stakeholder workshops or community walking workshops, the OC pizza night, and the OCP summary broadsheet, plus the incidental costs of doing that. So that is all consistent with the motion that was tabled at council. So my understanding is if council now approves that motion, we are in fact approving the budget for those 5 optional items that are identified in the OCP committee's recommendations.
Yes, I agree, and we could then proceed to consider the second recommendation, and depending on how we voted, we might have to amend the budget.
Correct.
Thank you. So is there any discussion? So we do have a mover and seconder of lifting it. Is there any further discussion on the motion to approve the $50,000 increase in budget? I'll let Councillor Wainwright continue and then go to Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the committee was actually, I'm going to say, enthusiastic about the 5 items that are in that first recommendation. There was a fair amount of discussion about the OC pizza night, which is one of the items that there was some concern about at the last council meeting. They felt that it was for the amount of money involved, and that you wouldn't actually be spending that money unless people actually completed the workbook and submitted it, that it was a very good value, and that it was thinking outside the box in terms of community engagement. So they were strongly supportive of the optional items that are in that first recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And previously, I'd expressed concern with respect to expanding on the budget, or increasing the budget in order to address, the list of extras. My rationale simply was that I felt, we'd awarded this work in anticipation of a process that was going to enable engagement without a host of extras. And I felt like I'd walked off a car lot having bought paint protection, fabric protection, and insurance for my wheels when I hit the curb. Nevertheless, I'm very much pleased with the feedback from the committee, from the members of the committee in particular, who are volunteers who went through this and find real value in this, to the tune of the $50,000 that we're looking to increase the budget by. And as such, I will support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And just a small clarification that what the committee is supporting is just over 30,000, and then council is to consider the 20,000 of incidentals, as Councillor Wainwright did indicate at the beginning. But thank you for that input. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favour? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Councillor. If you wish to continue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the second recommendation from the committee, and I so move, is that the OCP project work plan be approved with the addition of the ambassador program as detailed and suggested by MODIS.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second for discussion.
Thank you, Councillor. Discussion, Councillor Wainwright?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this one got a strong majority support from the committee. I'll just note that the item has a budget of $6,500 attached to it, and the significant discussion that the committee had really was not about whether the ambassador program was worthwhile, but rather whether it was appropriate to have Modus supervising it, or whether it would be more efficient to have it supervised by staff. So the member that voted against it felt strongly that it shouldn't be Modus supervising the ambassadors, but rather that it should be a staff supervised initiative. So I think one of the major things that came up in the discussion from the committee was the feeling that that there are sectors of the public who will likely listen more and pay more attention to somebody who's closer to their demographic. And the idea then of ambassadors, as in some younger people to reach out to the younger people, some seniors to communicate to the seniors, as that being more likely to get engagement from some of the demographic than our, let's say, traditional outreach methods. I think one of the other comments that was made was that it's a very small amount of money in the overall scheme of things, and they felt we shouldn't be too stingy about the budget. I think I've summarized the gist of the discussion, and as I say, the committee did. They weren't unanimous on this, and there certainly was a view expressed that if this is done, staff should be running the show rather than Modus.
Thank you, Councillor. Also being at that meeting, I concur with all of the comments that you made, and that it was only one member in opposition and partially on the funding component. I do have a question through to staff, in part on the information that was provided in the staff report written for this evening's meeting on the community pop-ups. In Modus's work plan under community pop-ups, it talks about a success target of about 40 attendees per pop-up, but it doesn't indicate for $6,500 how many pop-ups might be the target. Would you have information on that by chance?
To respond to the question, I don't believe there's any specific number of pop-ups identified. Most of the $6,500 that Modus has detailed in that budget item is time spent training and preparing materials for those ambassadors, who are, I believe, largely volunteers, just interested members of the community. And so it's, yeah, largely the consultant's time to prepare the program rather than, pay anyone to go out and do it. So really it would be up to the volunteers' availability and what opportunities there are to get out into the community that would dictate the number of sessions that we do.
Thank you for that response, and good to highlight that the majority of this cost would go to the training of and preparing the volunteers. This one is a tough one for me in the sense that, having listened to all of the committee representatives, they did highlight, as Councillor Wainwright has indicated, that there is a bit of uniqueness to this part of the approach, that it does have the advantage of being able to target specific demographics with volunteers in the same demographic. There was another aspect that was actually mentioned to me outside the meeting. I'm not sure it came up in the meeting, but that was the target for this is to operate from July to September. And they saw benefits to having volunteers in the near future engaging and starting to disseminate information about our OCP process with the public. And I do see advantage to that as well. Having read the staff report, However, I also see merits in the staff information, in that if it was done from in-house, we would certainly have excellent expertise from staff in terms of their knowledge of the OCP, and their experience in community engagement previously would lead them to be a good representatives to engage. I'm not sure if we would try to match demographics necessarily, and that might be a challenge at the very young and the more senior population. But I do see that as well. So I guess a question to staff is, if I've correctly described what is in your report, could you give an indication of would there be additional cost in terms of the staff time to do the pop-ups, and would you have an indication of how many pop-ups you might seek to do, even a rough number?
I don't believe there would be additional monetary costs, but there would certainly be additional staff time costs. Likely, I would be essentially preparing the program in-house, and any materials that might go with it. If we were able to utilize outside volunteers, there'd be a bit of training time to go with that. We have had 1 or 2 people volunteer just sort of out of the blue. My preference would be to try as much as possible to utilize existing planning staff to do that work, just because the training time would be minimal, and planning staff tend to have any answers at the ready, just because we deal with this stuff every day. I mean, ideally, I would like to do, say, up to 20 separate kind of, I wouldn't call them events, but, you know, head out to Beacon Avenue for 3 hours one morning. If possible, visit a local school just for a quick session, trying to set up smaller chunks of time like that, rather than have sort of big, long events, would be the preference.
Okay. Thank you for the answer. My speaking list has Councillor O'Keefe next, then Councillor Rintoul. Councillor O'Keefe?
Yes, I guess I'm leaning to going with staff's recommendation on this for a few reasons. I think that, you know, with the increased budget of $50,000 and having added the OC Pizza Night, that to me there seems lots of opportunities for people to engage and get involved in different things. And so if there were people out there who were volunteers that thought they wanted to help promote the OCP a bit more, that would be an opportunity for them. I agree with staff that community engagement and soliciting good feedback is best done by people who have got experience in that field. And so, yeah, I would incline to go with staff's recommendation on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe, or Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And at risk of sounding miserly, I do think it's you know, further funds towards the project that, given our current climate, we will likely need to allocate elsewhere. I'm not convinced either in the sort of pandemic climate that we're going to, through pop-ups and the type of engagement we're talking about, that we're going to reach the demographic that we're seeking. And so I'm going to yield to the staff report, and I won't support this particular recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I don't support paying Modus to organize a training program and you know, administer it. And I appreciate that staff are in a good position to do the kind of pop-ups that Mr. Newcomb was talking about earlier. But I think the idea of ambassadors actually still has some merit, and not so much using them to get input, but rather to build awareness that we're doing the OCP review and about OCP events that we're holding. And I've already passed this suggestion on to staff, but shortly after this OCP review meeting, I got my hair cut. And you know, you're captive with your barber or stylist, you know, for 10 to 15 minutes. And inevitably there's conversation about various civic stuff. If we actually provided just, you know, basic information that was awareness that we're doing the OCP review, where to find information, what the next upcoming event is, and rolled it out through hairstylists and barbers. Like Beacon Barber is doing 3 to 4 customers an hour, 8-hour day. You know, they're arguably going to be reaching a couple of dozen people with whatever the message is every day. And if we're not looking for them to bring us back feedback, if all we're doing is asking them to push awareness of things, I think that actually is something we should try to take advantage of. And if staff can put together the information without requiring extra budget, and if they're doing their walkarounds and just stop by, you know, a different hairstylist every day, we probably can get quite a bit of information out there without the need to amend the budget. So I'm not going to support increasing the budget by $6,500 to do it, but I would encourage staff to make use of ambassadors.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Fallett and then Councillor Duncan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As I'm listening to the conversation back and forth, and I actually hear some merit in what Councillor Wainwright is suggesting, I feel people are getting fatigued with electronic connection and are seeking human connection. And I think if the more we have the opportunity to connect information person to person, we will gain by it. Handing out leaflets and flyers is, people don't want that. They want, and I reflect back to looking at the survey, the resident survey, point after point after point was about mental health. And a big portion of that was the isolation. And I think if we connect with people in different ways and make it actual connections, as opposed to saying, here's a leaflet, here's a flyer, please go ahead and read it, or go online. Yes, they can always do that, but I think we need the person-to-person connection. And if we can find a way to do that, I would encourage us to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was a great idea from Councillor Wainwright about the barber. And like Councillor Fallett said, that face-to-face is precious. And I know we've even had people, I think, come and say in public participation, maybe it was after council, it's all blurring together, you know, that they thought, well, when council did door knocking, I mean, that's when we got some of the best feedback that we are still acting on is that, you know, face-to-face door knocking, and not just ourselves, but people who went with us. And so in that sense, we already know that kind of ambassador contact really does get the best feedback. Obviously, there might be drawbacks to having a program where we send people door to door right now, and staff will not necessarily want to do that. But yeah, the idea of staff being able to be the ones to prepare something so that some key businesses like hairdressers, probably some of our other businesses on Beacon, and certainly our bylaw officers who have been getting to know them all very, very well over the last few weeks as they've had to go to everybody and give them stickers and make sure that everything is up to snuff will probably know which business owners would make really great ambassadors. There are definitely some who are very good at talking to their customers when they come in and will tell you all about what's going on in town. So finding the ones that staff feel would be the best ambassadors might be useful. And we know that at barbers they always have the little ads that sit up at their mirror, so they don't even have to bring it up. As long as they've got that ad sitting there and their customer says, "What's this about?" They can enter that conversation. And since we just approved that increase of $50,000, and some of that did include advertising, that might include some of our advertising budget itself. As if we have those little bits of information at key businesses, then we might be able to take some of that from that and use staff's time in that as well. So thanks for bringing up that idea.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett and then myself to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Although I do see merit in some of what other councillors are raising, I guess my biggest concern is how much training can people have, and will they legitimately be able to answer questions that people have? And our staff is trained in that area, so there's only so much information they can give to a hairstylist to answer a specific question. So my fear would be that if they get inconclusive answers or answers that are not even correct, then that leads to more confusion. And I think I want this to be a seamless process. So I think, we have to rely on the expertise of our staff. And if they figure they can do this, reaching out to the public with their knowledge base, that would be my preference.
Thank you, Councillor. I want to comment that I do not support increasing the budget to have Modus operate an ambassador component to the OCP process. However, I do very much like the creative ideas that have come forward. And a question through to staff is, having heard the creativity on some of the ideas, I don't think it has to be a single focus in terms of pop-ups or this form of engagement. I think there can be a little bit of variety. But do you see a cost being attached to it if staff is to do this, and at some small level, perhaps, or not include volunteers?
In terms of additional cost, I think now that we are looking at getting these infographics, I think those would be a great, if necessary, a handout that if we do approach the barbers in town or something like that, we could provide them with a little stack of cards based on the infographics that would sort of maybe prompt conversation and get the discussion going, and have something for maybe people to take away with comment room on the back that they could drop off at the town hall. So there might be some minor printing costs in terms of getting those printed off. I mean, in terms of, say, myself or another planning staff member going out to Beacon Avenue and answering some questions for a few hours a day over the summer or whenever, no, it's just staff time. We could print up some materials in-house and sort of have a board to point to as discussion points. So I think it could be done at relatively little or no cost.
Thank you. Councillor Rintoul. Oh, sorry, Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Wainwright's idea is a good one. I think having very sort of informal ambassadors, people who would, councillors should be ambassadors for this. And I like the idea, Mr. Newcomb talking about having a bit of information that could be made available at a barbershop or to anyone in the community who is interested in helping raise the profile and interest of the OCP. I'm thinking of a short pamphlet or rack card that would talk about what's the OCP, why is it important, maybe some of the issues that we might be looking at, and how to participate. If there's going to be set dates in the fall, letting people know what those dates are, or as you had suggested, a card that could be dropped off at Town Hall, or an email address where they could, or a website that they could go and provide their input. I'm also cognizant of Councillor Fallett's, concern about people wanting personal contact and that sort of thing. I just, in this current climate, I don't know that we're going to be able to do as much of that as maybe we would like. So I like this idea of a mini ambassador program.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I agree, there's been some creative suggestions, and look, we've just approved an additional 5 or 6 items around engagement tonight. This is one that staff, weren't recommending for reasons that have been summarized. I want to see our community participate in this process. And I actually do believe if we were forecasting, sort of a sense of normalcy around having a pop-up booth and being able to be engaged and provide that contact that Councillor Fallett referenced, that this would be worthwhile of staff time. In my opinion, Mr. Newcomb knocks on my office door with his new haircut and stands 6 feet away with a mask on and wants to have some conversation with the OCP. I think I'm going to wonder if he hasn't got better things to do, in the sense that he's a senior member of our staff, and I think got some responsibilities probably in this process that his time would be spent better than investing in a training program for a variety of ambassadors to do this. So I'm going to continue to, with all due respect to the recommendation from the group, continue to suggest that it not be supported. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion that's on the floor is from the report that the addition of the ambassador program as detailed and suggested by Modus is the recommendation. I'm not seeing a consensus amongst colleagues for that particular motion. While I have seen interest in different ideas for ambassador, I don't know. We could call the question on this motion, or if the mover wants to reconsider that particular motion. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it is appropriate for us to vote on the recommendation that came out of the committee, and but I agree with you. I'm not anticipating that it's going to have support. In terms of follow-up from there, I'm not sure that we actually need to give staff a direction, or a motion, if there's no budget involved. They've heard our discussion today, and they can think about where they go from there. I don't think they need direction. But I do think we should vote on the motion that came from the committee. Just to, housekeeping, we should deal with it.
Thank you, Councillor. I support that rationale. Any further discussion on the motion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? A unanimous opposed. The motion is defeated. And I don't know, is there, Councillor Wainwright has spoken. Does anyone else wish to consider a motion? Seeing none, I'll move on from that item. Thank you, Councillor Wainwright, for taking us through that. And I'll now turn to item 12.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry.
Just a question. We just want to clarify that have we addressed a motion with respect to the OCP project work plan and community engagement plan being approved?
Okay, Councillor Wainwright, sorry, when you took the motion from the previous meeting, I know I have that before me somewhere. Did it include just the budget, or was it the budget and the work plan and engagement plan?
Mr. Mayor, the motion was purely increasing the budget.
Okay, so I do believe we should have a motion, as staff has indicated, with regards to council approving the Modus work plan and engagement plan.
I will move that council approve the work plan, including the 5 optional items recommended by the OCP review committee.
Second.
We haven't moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Call the question. All in favor? That motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, staff. Okay, we'll now turn to item 12E, Committee of the Whole, and I'll turn to Councillor Garnett, our liaison, or who was chair at last council meeting, sorry.
I'll move that minutes be received.
All those in favor? That motion carries unanimous.
And committee so recommends, and I move that staff be directed to bring forward an amendment to building regulations bylaw number 2016 to require developers of multifamily buildings to install one appropriately sized water meter for the entire building and individual water meters in each suite to be managed by the future strata.
Second.
Discussion, Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. Just in terms of the wording, in the last sentence where it talks about individual water meters in each suite, I'm wondering if that was actually the intention, that they want them in each suite. And the reason I'm saying that is my understanding is the current practice in multifamily buildings is that the individual water meters are located in a utility closet or in one place on each floor of the building. And so I would think whether we're the ones reading the meters or whether those are going to be read by the strata, that we would want to avoid the issues that staff identified with reading individual meters. And so that we would not, in fact, want them in each suite, but we would want them located in a common location or words to that effect.
Okay, I see staff perhaps wishing to comment, but I might just add perhaps a simple amendment that individual water meters allocated to each suite to be managed by the future strata. Would that?
Yeah, if staff thinks that is clear and that would meet what we're looking for, the spirit of what we're looking for in terms of them all being in one place.
I'll turn to Mr. Humble or Ms. Clary.
I was just going to say that, yeah, we hear what we're saying. We'll address it in the bylaw and bring the bylaw wording forward.
Okay, yeah, so it'll be proper, this is a recommendation, but it has to come forward in a bylaw, so it'll be worded appropriately with that intent in the bylaw. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay.
Thank you, Steph.
Oh, wait. I thought you wanted to say something.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? We have one opposed. The motion carries.
Okay, and the committee so recommends, and I move that development permit application number DP 100817 at 10478 Resthaven Drive be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for further review and comment, subject to the condition that prior to review by the Advisory Planning Commission, the applicant submit revised plans showing spatial separation calculations and design revisions that conform to the BC Building Code.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Councillor.
The committee so recommends, and I move that number one, that the front yard, this is for development permit, variance permit application number DV 100296 at 9650 5th Street to relax maximum fence height. One, that the front yard fence along 5th Street be brought into conformance with zoning bylaw number 2015. Two, that the proposed exterior side yard fence along Orchard Avenue be redesigned as a 1.5 meter high fence constructed of no more than 1.2 meters of solid panels topped with 0.3 meters of open lattice. In the exterior side yard of the subject property outside a 7 meter setback from the southwest corner of the property to be in compliance with zoning bylaw requirements for visual clearance. Three, that a land survey be completed. Four, that the front yard hedge along 5th Street be pruned to be in compliance with zoning bylaw requirements for visual clearance at intersections. And five, that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, that is 246 feet of 9650 5th Street, be notified regarding development variance permit number DV 100296 to vary the maximum permitted fence height in an exterior side yard and to vary the exterior side yard setback in order to legalize the existing patio structure, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance.
Second for discussion.
Discussion? Councillor Rintoul, then Councillor O'Keefe, then Councillor Duncan, and then I would like to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I want to thank staff for certainly the amount of time they put into the report and the, I think, evolving understanding of what it is that's happened here. And to Mr. Mackay, I commend his tradesmanship, who's quite quickly, I would suggest, made adjustments to the fence on a number of occasions, given his presentations. I guess my concern is I'm not convinced I know where this is at right now, Mr. Mayor. We had an application. The presentation that was given to us a week ago, certainly the presentation from the applicant differed from the staff report in terms of where things were and how things had been moved already. We're seeing again today in a presentation from Mr. Mackay and some new photos that there have been some additional changes made on the basis of some of the discussions, and I think perhaps in all fairness, to Mr. Mackay, we might need to catch our breath here. I don't know through the mayor to staff if there's a mechanism for us to refer this back to the applicant so that we could perhaps get a revised report that's accurate in terms of the present condition today, because I'm not convinced I understand what we're looking at any longer, Mr. Mayor. So I'll leave my comments there.
Thank you. I'll turn to staff. Ms. Verhagen.
Sure. Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul. Yes, council could make a motion to refer this back to staff to prepare a secondary report explaining how the applicant has changed the fences since the first report was written. Looking at the photos that were submitted today, it appears that the fence height is still greater than the bylaw permits along the side exterior lot line, which is the Orchard Avenue frontage. The red and black fence, the one that's in the front yard, is still in the visual clearance zone in the intersection. The applicant mentioned that he had removed fence panels measuring back from the corner of the intersection. However, the zoning bylaw requirement for visual clearance at intersections requires that 7-meter setback triangle be measured from the corner of the property line, not the street intersection, which pushes it further back. So the front hedge, the front fence, and the exterior side lot line fence appear to still be within that visual clearance zone, which must be reduced in height. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Verhagen. Did you have a follow-up, Councillor?
If I may, I'll just state to my colleagues that if the motion fails, I will look to make a motion to refer this back to staff for secondary report. Thank you.
Okay, on my speaking list, I have Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor Duncan, myself, and then Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm inclined to stick with the recommendations as they are. While I realize that there have been some changes made and we don't know necessarily where things are at, I still support staff's initial recommendations in terms of proceeding with this as outlined here. I listened to the applicant's concerns about privacy and security, but those are things that you have to take into account when you purchase a residence. And if you're living on the corner of two streets, those are things that I think people have to be aware of. That particular orchard area is an area that has a lot of, it's intensive development, I believe, so small lots, not much room between houses. And so I think once we start to allow higher fences in one area, we're going to have to allow that for others as well. And I'm concerned about the impact that has on the overall neighborhood. So I'm fine with the motion as it is. The only thing that I would suggest is that whether we want to reconsider whether a land survey be required. At this time, there was some comment that they had located the pins for the property line. So I might be more inclined to say, instead of a land survey to be completed, that the property line be confirmed with staff. And I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll now turn to Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I'm prepared to move this as it is, with the exception of point 3 about the land survey. Now that he said that they've found the pins and they know how to find those lines again, that seems like it might be superfluous. But otherwise, I've heard their arguments, and as somebody with an entirely front-facing yard, I find their concerns for safety and the fact that people can see them is somehow inherently dangerous unconvincing. So I am prepared to move the recommendations as they are.
Thank you, Councillor. My comment is that I appreciate receiving these photos today. This is what I saw when I received the council package prior to the last meeting, or committee of the whole package prior to the last meeting. And so there was confusion in my mind in terms of what we were trying to consider at the last meeting. And I concur with Councillor Rintoul that there may even be a point today where we're not certain of certain measurements. And so I would support this going back to staff and a report coming back with what we see here. The comments I would have from the photographs that we're looking at today is that with regards to what is referred to as the red fence panel, and with the requirement for that to be, that is currently at 6 feet or 1.84 meters, and needs to be reduced, as does the side panel, to 1.5 meters. That is not currently a safety issue. There is a hedge taller than that. There is a fence at the proper height at the property line on 5th Street. The proponent has agreed to reduce the height of the hedge to conform with town regulations. But I don't see, even with that hedge being trimmed, that the sight lines are going to be affected by that red panel. I respect the residents' request for privacy on the corner. It's a relatively short piece of fence in the scheme of things. Its height is certainly no different than adjoining hedges on adjoining properties. With regards to 2 points made, one at last council meeting and one at this meeting, that if fences were like this throughout the Orchard neighborhood, it would look unreasonable. I think if you were to take the treatment in front of any house in the neighborhood and apply it across the neighborhood would look odd or unusual. I think there's a mixture of treatments within the neighborhood, and I think this is relatively small. It is unique in being a small lot development. And I think the residents have moved the fence back off the property line to the proper setback, as to be confirmed by staff and the pins. And so I would prefer to have a staff report come back, and I would be in favor of actually granting the height if it was at 6 feet. I'll now turn to Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support all the recommendations as they are and were made last time. I did 2 site visits, and I had no confusion. I was looking at the original plans, looked at and I could visibly see that it had been moved, got out, looked at it. So the pictures we have today were what I saw when I went anyway, so there's nothing new there for me. As far as the red and black fence, the proponent had mentioned tonight that it's not really visible with the hedge, but when the hedge is pruned, it will be visible. So it is not in compliance. So, and as has been mentioned previously, I mean, unfortunately, when you buy a home in that position, based on sight lines and where it is, that's why the regulations are there. It's for public safety. I guess overall they're concerned about their safety too, but there's visibility issues on the corner. Unfortunately, in 5th Street's a very busy street, so I think staff's recommendations were solid, and I'm willing to accept them as they are and as the recommendations. Thanks.
Seeing no further speakers, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? We have 2 opposed. The motion carries. And thank you, Councillor Garnett, for taking us through Committee of the Whole. We'll now turn to staff reports. And our first staff report is item 13A, the temporary expansion of liquor license service area at the Mary Winspear Centre, a report dated from staff July 13th.
Move the recommendation that staff be directed to reply to the Mary Winspear Center approving the proposed temporary changes to its licensed liquor service areas.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. I'll turn to item 13B, summary of the EOC resident survey responses.
I'll move the recommendation, number one, that the EOC resident survey results be reviewed by staff and the COVID-19 Recovery Task Force Committee to help identify recovery actions to support the needs of the community through the COVID-19 pandemic. And two, that the survey results be shared with the community through the town website and social media.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to comment. I agree with staff's 618 people responded, and that actually is a really good response rate. It shows you how much and how important this whole pandemic is to everybody, that people took the time to do that. And I want to thank all the residents who took the time to fill out the survey, because it's definitely something that's important for us. It gives us a snapshot, allows us to hopefully help people in the community going forward. I did notice in there, one particular thing I pulled out was the amount of people who responded who were going to pay their property taxes and their utility bills, and how high that was. And I just also want to pass on my thanks to everybody who has done that. It helps support the economic bottom line of the town, and it's very much appreciated. And so thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor. I'm sure Council echoes those positive comments. It is quite a substantial report, which we appreciate having, and the task force is reviewing. And I think it forms a great baseline as the committee and staff have discussed earlier, the opportunity to do a follow-up survey to see progress and future input. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple things that I pulled out. First of all, thank you to staff for such a comprehensive report and lots of information to go through, and all the individual comments I think are really interesting. So one of the things I pulled out that struck me is the age range of the respondents. So looking at the fact that 72% of respondents were 50 years and older. And so I guess as we're going through and planning strategies and we're looking at feedback, I'm hoping that the task force will keep that in mind, that we're really not getting a lot of input from young people and young families. The response for those in the 20 to 49 year age group was only 28%. So maybe, keeping that in mind, and then also if there is a plan for a follow-up survey, maybe we can, come up with some different sort of ideas on how we can do things differently to reach out to those particular age groups. And I guess I'll just, one other thing I guess I'll just comment on is a number of people expressed concern about keeping Sydney safe and being cautious on reopening. And we had some correspondence come on that today as well, about people maybe not feeling safe as we reopen. And I myself have noticed in downtown area and in some shops that people are not as attentive as they once were to social distancing rules. And we saw today from Bonnie Henry and others that there is a concern about another big blimp in the pandemic. So I guess I'm wondering about what the town's role will be in that. I don't know if staff are able to comment at this time, but I know that they did a good job when we were at a level 2 EOC in terms of educating businesses. If there was chronic offenders, reporting those to WorkSafe BC. Now that we're down to a level 1, I'm wondering what processes or what can we put in place to report offenders, I guess is the best word. Is there a number that people can call to WorkSafe, or will our bylaw enforcement staff continue to monitor those things? Maybe a question to staff if they're able to comment on that.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm turning to Ms. Verhagen.
Heather, thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. Yes, staff will continue to monitor that, and if we receive complaints from the community about businesses or activities that may not be following provincial guidance, then we would recommend that those complaints be passed on to WorkSafe BC if it's a place of business, or to Island Health. Town staff can act in an ambassador role. We have our business liaison officers that are town staff and fire department staff that went out to businesses that were looking for more help in their reopening. Our own actions are limited in that, but we can pass them on to other bodies, which can help more in ensuring people are behaving in a safe fashion.
Thank you.
That's good to know. So individuals would just, who would they contact specifically? Email or phone number if they wanted to pass along any concerns they might have?
Again, through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, I don't have that information handy, but I do believe it would be on the town's COVID-19 webpage. It probably is already there, and if it's not, I'll make sure that it's added. Thank you.
Okay, so I think there was a number there. I was just uncertain whether, now that we're down to a level 1 EOC, whether the contact information was the same. So that's fine, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Ms. Verhagen. Further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now turn to item 13C, Victoria Distillers Limited Ocean Cooling Loop proposal at 9891 Seaport Place, and a report from staff dated July 14th.
I'll move the staff recommendation that council approve Victoria Distillers Cooling Loop proposal in principle and authorize staff to issue the appropriate permits for the project to proceed, subject to the submission of any required documents and approvals. 2, that staff be authorized to prepare and enter into a statutory right-of-way agreement with Victoria Distillers for the use of town land, and that this agreement indemnify the town against harm or loss as a result of the installation or operation of the proposed cooling loop system. 3, that any costs associated with the preparation or execution of agreements associated with the proposal be borne by Victoria Distillers. 4, that prior to any construction proceeding, Victoria Distillers provide the town with a copy of the completed environmental assessment and approval of Department of Fisheries and Oceans for the project, confirming no significant adverse impact to the marine environment. And 5, that prior to commencing any construction on town property, Victoria Distillers apply for and receive a building permit for the system and a right-of-way permit for the construction on town land, which includes insurance in an amount satisfactory to the Director of Engineering.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor O'Toole, did you wish to comment as the mover?
Not yet, thank you.
I'll go to Councillor O'Keefe, but I think, sorry, before Councillor O'Keefe, I'm going to turn to Mr. Newcomb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just quickly, it may be that instead of a statutory right-of-way, it may be a utility easement that's required. We're not sure which. The function of the document would be the same, to provide them with access, but I'm not sure if the motion needs amending or not, but just thought I'd mention that.
Could you direct us, you in the place, Councillor O'Toole?
Sure, I think that's the second bullet with reference to statutory right-of-way, and we'll change it to read or utility easement agreement.
Second.
We'll call that a friendly amendment. Thank you, staff. Sorry, discussion. Sorry, did I see your hand, Councillor O'Keefe?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so I'm inclined to support this, and I just wanted to comment that at a time when we're seeing so many businesses struggling, it's encouraging to see a business that is able to expand, and I think this is exactly the sort of thing we should be supporting in terms of an existing business and allowing it to expand itself, expand, and have such a positive impact on our economy. So kudos to Victoria Distilleries, and I'm happy to support the motion unless I hear something from my colleagues that convinces me otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duncan, and then I would like to speak.
Yeah, I'm in favor of this, and as the rep on the CRD Water Commission right now, I just thought I'd point out that converting these one-time flow-through cooling units in restaurants and retail is one of the pushes that the CRD has on for water conservation. So the fact that we have a business that's choosing to do that, replace one of those flow-through units in a really innovative way that saves energy and water is really great. Thank you for helping us get to water efficiency and lower our greenhouse gas emissions.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you to both councillors for those comments. I just want to applaud Victoria Distillers for investing at this time, but investing in innovative technology that will help their business, but also helps the environment. And I'll turn to any further speakers. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Now turning to item 13D, which is public washrooms in downtown Sydney. And there are two parts to this report. There is, sorry, I'm just turning to it now. There is the discussion over the replacement of the 4th Street washrooms, and then there's discussion with regards to further washroom services closer to the waterfront. On the first part, I would like to recuse myself with a conflict of interest. I own the property, commercial property adjoining the public washrooms, and given that council is considering a possible alternate location, I wish to recuse myself at this time. I'll ask Councillor Garnett to chair that aspect of this report, and I would like to return to discuss the other washrooms in our community.
Thank you. So at this point, I'll move recommendation number 2, that the existing 4th Street washrooms be replaced with an accessible semi-permanent event washroom trailer.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor Duncan?
Is that not recommendation 1 on the replace 4th Street washroom options?
Councillor Rentoul, would you wish to speak to why you moved number 2 first?
He said he read the text of number 1, but I thought I had heard him say he'd moved number 2, but then read the text of number 1. So I just want to clarify.
Can you clarify?
No, I can't. I'll have to turn to staff.
Councillor Duncan, seeking clarification.
Through the chair, the recommendation that was moved by Councillor Rintoul is under the recommendation section at the very end of the report, not up in the body of the report where it's listed as R1.
Thank you. I'm on the wrong page. My apologies.
Any other discussion?
If I may, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, it's my interpretation, and I'll yield to staff on this, that the other 3 recommendations would more appropriately relate to the matter of washroom facilities broader throughout the town. I'm seeing nods, so yeah, indeed, this item is what we should be discussing at this point. And I'll point out, certainly from my standpoint, that the suggestion here that's been made by staff around an accessible semi-permanent event washroom trailer sounds appropriate given the nature of it being on leased land and some of the other points staff raised. So I'm comfortable with the recommendation, Mr. Chair.
Any other comments or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Just wait for the mayor to come back.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. Okay, thank you. So we're now turning to the new washroom in downtown Sydney component, and I'll leave it to council to,
If I may, Mr. Mayor, my preference at least would to get a little more context from staff before looking to move recommendations, if you wouldn't mind. The only reason I note that is because even in the first recommendation, which limits further investigation to future developments, I'm wondering why that couldn't include, current locations, for example, within that reference. And so I guess I'd like just a little more context from staff personally.
no, I think certainly given some of the details in this report that it's certainly reasonable to ask staff questions before a motion is put on the floor.
So maybe, did you want me to start, Mr. Mayor? Sure. If I may, through to staff then, just so that if I could better understand the recommendation around limiting pursuing these facilities in the context of future developments with some vacancies currently in the core and perhaps even in some of the areas we're talking about requiring additional washroom facilities, could we not look at current locations or change the wording in that first motion to read inappropriate locations in city versus inappropriate future developments in Sydney? I just wanted some feedback from staff on that suggestion.
Through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul, that's definitely something we can make the change on. The idea is it's likely going to be expensive to renovate an existing building, but it is an option. We were looking at other options where new development might be a good opportunity because we'll have a little bit more leverage on those locations.
Thank you. Other questions of staff with regards to the report? I do have a question, and having viewed the locations on the map and the type of installation that the Portland Loo is, in the staff report, it mentioned that staff had seen this particular installation elsewhere. I don't know if that's on South Island or elsewhere on the island. I guess my concern is the proximity to fairly heavy pedestrian traffic on immediately adjacent sidewalk, certainly with the Beacon Avenue locations. I realize those are probably the most reasonable locations that are in the report, but quite frankly, I don't favor any of those locations. A question I have is in the space between the aquarium that is in the pier building and a Victoria Distillers, there was once a small area of playground that I'm not sure is parking area for Victoria's Distiller, but is there any land in that proximity? It just seems that it's out of the main pathway, and whether an arrangement could be made on public land at that part of Beacon Park, or whether there's Sydney Pier land or Victoria Distiller land that might, if there was any consideration given to that.
Through to the mayor. So that location is a little ways from existing utilities. We could consider it more. It'll be a little bit more costly for installation. But I'll have to refer to Mr. Humble as far as the history of that location.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, I believe actually it's I don't believe there's a whole lot of land available there as well. I think I know the parkette you're speaking of, Mr. Mayor, but I believe now that's, and again I would have to check, but I think it's entirely being utilized as sort of a parking access egress area for Victoria Distillers. I don't know if there's any surplus land there, but I could be mistaken.
A question might be, and I wasn't expecting a map. I just literally came up with this later today. Is there, between the path that's right on the waterfront in that area, is there town park land? Because I know it's park in front of the Pier Hotel.
Right.
It's town. Beacon Park is town land. But I guess I shouldn't ask on a, you know, for an answer on a very, very specific location, but I would be in favor of trying to arrange a location like that, because I think location is actually the biggest part of the decision. I realize this is expensive, but I think we have to get the location right, or the community will not respond favorably in public opinion, and I don't know that the public would necessarily be comfortable in some cases utilizing the additional service. So I'm in favor of actually support additional cost within reason, but I think it is going to be at some expense that we have to find the right location. Again, a question would be when Eastview Park was suggested is, again, and I can't remember the sculpture, I think was a dog on the board and it went to the skate park, but it was immediately adjacent to the condo. And there's a little green space. Of course, there was the fundraiser with the bricks supporting the pier, but again, that space is not, if it's a little setback off the path, it's not in the immediate traffic area. So I'm not sure of the specific location in Eastview Park, but just asking if that was given consideration. Again, I do appreciate that staff is considering where existing utilities are, the distance from the existing utilities, and given that the Portland Loo has already risen in cost by a significant amount, but I want to stress the importance of location to, I think, our community.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are a number of factors absolutely that need to be considered as part of this, and also appreciating that finding the right location is going to be critical. There's always going to be challenges as well in Eastview Park when you talk about even if we deem it to have a setback from multifamily residential. I know a bit about the history of that Eastview Park. I remember when we tried to look at relocating the band shell in that, not a public washroom, a band shell in that area, and the residents came out in mass in opposition to that. And so fundamentally, yeah, there are going to be some inherent challenges with respect to potential siting. And I mean, staff are presenting what we deem to be the appropriate options, and if council wants us to go back and revisit, if council wants to look at increasing the overall budget to maybe provide additional opportunities to expand the search for appropriate locations, we can do that. But yeah.
Thank you. I have a further comment, but I'll turn to my colleagues. So I'll turn first to Councillor Duncan.
Thanks. I had many of the reservations that the mayor has already spoken, and I assumed that staff had gone over and brought us forward the list of locations that were feasible with the existing connections. The only one I could consider was at Eastview Park. So for the Portland Loo anyway. So my recollection is that the reason we are looking at washrooms and that we want to have additional washrooms is that the business community has requested this for us, and specifically because of the number of people we have coming for events. And the reason I think that that's important to kind of pull out is that when we were looking at the Portland Loo, this was the one that was specifically designed to allow people to have washrooms where, public urination was becoming a problem in major cities. And so they needed a way to let vulnerable people who had no access to washrooms have access to washrooms that they would not then destroy or do other unsavory things in. And so these are two very different goals. And I'm just wondering, I don't want to move something that meets the first goal, that makes it a nightmare for maintenance for staff and really introduces a new problem. And I also recognize that we probably have vulnerable people who could need washrooms overnight that Sydney doesn't currently supply, but I'm thinking that there's got to be a third option we might need to go back to for that one. Because when I was looking at the reviews for the Portland Loo, it really does not seem like it has been designed with event goers in mind. The positive review was, this is a quote of a positive review: "The openings also help sound flow freely, letting pedestrians hear the grunts and splashes of the person inside, and the person inside hear the footsteps and conversation of pedestrians." So I feel that the mayor's concern is very correct there, that if we spend a lot of money and we put this one in, and that's true, we're going to get a lot of pushback, especially since all of our sightings are very public. So I'm just wondering how to ask this question to staff about prior to us considering whether we would add an additional washroom, whether RCMP or others were coming forward with ideas about how to supply washroom facilities for our vulnerable population, and whether any requests for that have been coming forward in a way that we could accommodate.
Staff wish to comment?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any specific requests from the RCMP with respect to additional washroom facilities for our vulnerable population.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul and Councillor O'Keefe.
Perhaps I'll yield to Councillor O'Keefe, Mr. Mayor. I've spoken. Thank you.
Councillor O'Keefe, you have the floor.
Yeah, so funny you should mention that spot, Mr. Mayor, beside Victoria Distilleries, because I had my eye on that one as well. And I guess what I'm wondering, having just approved this thing for Victoria Distilleries, and thinking about that, and thinking about staff talking about not being close enough to tie into existing utilities, does the project that they're going to be working on and digging things up, I just wonder, provide any opportunities there for if we were to put washroom facilities in that little park area or on Victoria Distillery land with some compensation, whether what they're doing might provide an opportunity at all.
Staff wish to respond?
No, we can. Yeah, we can get back to council on that. It's a challenging question to respond to without having done the research in advance.
Okay. The other one I thought of was there's that little green space that's just sort of in front of the parking lot beside the Beacon Inn, I think it is, along the waterfront. Is that town-owned land, or is that owned by somebody else? Because that sort of seemed like a good location at all as well, if we had considered that. Do you know the plot of land I'm talking about?
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. So that there is some parkland in front of the hotel there. My understanding is during the waterfront visioning exercise, there was a strong request not to have washrooms there. There was some planned there, and the request was to not put them there. So that is why that was not recommended.
Okay. And just a couple other things. I was wondering about, I like the idea of, looking to get these, I guess, in new developments as maybe a community amenity. And I had heard that when the Pier Hotel went up, that part of the community amenity that was provided was use of public washrooms. And I'm wondering, is that the case? Is my understanding correct? And if so, are we, directing people there?
Sorry, if I don't know if staff wants to have a comment, but the situation is that with significant events that happen in Beacon Park, whether it's the Summer Sounds concerts, whether it's Canada Day celebrations, we have extremely large crowds, and those washrooms are overrun. And so the community organizations that run those events, CAG, have been the ones, as well as business, to request additional washroom facilities. And so while people will continue, members of the public will continue to use those washrooms, the challenge becomes when you have a significant event in the area. I mean, one of the requirements we can make, and we had discussions earlier this year, when negotiations were under review for the Thursday night market, whether we would have portable washrooms such as a contractor like the Sydney Market provider could use during that event. Would you roll those in and out for a Summer Sounds concert or that sort of thing? I mean, those options have been considered, but those washrooms in the Pier Hotel are being used for public, but they're not adequate for when we are a vibrant community on the waterfront.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thanks for that. That's good for me for now.
Okay, I have Councillor Garnett who wish to speak, and then I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul for a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question through you to staff. Since this was kind of an initiative that the business community was requesting, did they have a preference for where they wanted to see one located? Was there any indication that they thought one site was better than another?
Through the mayor to Councillor Garnett, no, I'm not aware they've indicated any preference. It was just an expressed desire for additional public washrooms.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, just to clarify, while the BIA is representative of the businesses, did request this. The event organizers, Peninsula Celebrations, the other members of CAG who hold these events have requested it as well. So I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with your earlier comments around the big challenge being location. Not necessarily what it is we're placing there, not necessarily, an adjustment to the budget at this stage. It's that location, and then seeing what is going to be the correct appliance for that location. And so, with that in mind, at least as a first step, I would like to modify the first staff recommendation slightly, and move that staff be directed to research and proactively pursue the possibility of negotiating the establishment of public washrooms at appropriate locations in Sydney.
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? I think that's unanimous. Opposed? Carries unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we're in a difficult spot here. We've had excellent discussion. Councillor Duncan.
I was already unmuted. I'm sorry. So I was not prepared to move recommendations 3 or 4. The location seems difficult, and the type of facility we're putting in those locations would be potentially expensive and potentially unsatisfactory to the business community that requested it. So instead, I'd prefer to move one of the options that was in our new washrooms in Sydney's downtown part of the discussion. That's why I was on the wrong spot earlier. That's where my notes are, which was option 3, that an event washroom trailer be purchased with the available Portland Loo budget and installed temporarily in either the town's 3rd Street parking lot or 2nd Street parking lot.
Do we have a seconder for that? We do not have a seconder, so the motion does not reach the floor. Councillor O'Keefe?
I'm wondering, since we haven't discussed locations with the SBIA, whether council would be interested in entertaining a motion that we approach the SBIA to provide input on potential locations for additional washroom facilities in the downtown core.
If council was supportive of moving forward on that, I would include not only the BIA in terms of the business members, but also the Sydney Event Advisory Group.
Yes. And I guess I was leaning more to the SBIA, but I would consider both. Yeah, so the SBIA and CA.
Do you wish to make a motion, Councillor?
Yes, sure. I'll make a motion that to that effect, that we approach the SBIA and the CA to provide input on suitable location for washroom facilities in the downtown core.
Second.
Second, discussion? I'll turn to staff. Mr. Humble?
If I can, Mr. Mayor, just maybe it might be good to just get some clarity when indicating if we're going to be seeking input on suitable, maybe some criteria for suitable. Are we talking about there? I mean, certainly they're not going to have any idea about what infrastructure is located within a specific area, additional costs, and those sorts of things. They might be able to provide some guidance on what businesses might be okay with having a washroom facility in close proximity, but it would be helpful to get some clarity in terms of what we're actually seeking input on.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. Yeah, I guess we would want their indication of what locations they were supportive of. And then council would have to come back and decide whether it was willing to allocate budget sufficient to those locations. Councillor O'Keefe.
As a start, I would propose to them the locations indicated by staff as Beacon Park, Eastview, First Street, and Beacon Avenue. And maybe the one, I don't know how we refer to it, that other little park area that we were talking about in front of the hotel, for those as a start, and leave it open to any other areas that they may have suggestions for.
Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I certainly like collecting insight from the business community. Councillor Garnett posed the question earlier. It wasn't yesterday. That whether or not the community had any, the business community had any specific suggestions or insight previously, and nothing had come forward. I know during my tenure as a council liaison to the SBIA, the purpose of this, to echo the mayor's comments, was around really providing support to event functions and to keep them from overflowing, business washroom facilities such as that at the Pier Hotel. And so I appreciate the spirit of the suggestion. It feels somewhat contrary to the motion we've just passed around asking staff to do some research and then start to look at some possibilities. And I think as a part of that process, we've asked staff to pursue the possibility of negotiating, establishing public washroom, and that to me is engaging potentially the business community. And so I think that is a byproduct of what we've already agreed to do, Mr. Mayor. So I won't support the motion, and frankly, I think we've done all we need to do tonight with this. I think we've said we need to establish the location, and then we need to look at the appliance that's right for the location. So I'll leave my comments there.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn back to Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor Duncan.
I'm happy with Councillor Rintoul's comment. If it's felt that part of what staff would do would be reaching out and as part of the research to reach out to the business community, I mean, I'm happy with that.
Do you wish to withdraw the motion, Councillor?
Sure, I will withdraw the motion.
Does the seconder concur?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan, did you wish to speak?
No, I was going to state why I was opposed to the motion, so if it's withdrawn, it doesn't matter.
Okay, is there any further discussion or motions? Okay, thank you for that discussion. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is item 13E, which is consultant selection for the Beacon Avenue West Traffic Impact Study, a report from staff dated July 13th.
I'll move that the consulting contract for the Beacon Avenue West Catchment Area Traffic Impact Study be awarded to Watt Consulting Group.
Second.
Discussion? Any, Councillor Garnett?
Thank you. Through you to staff. Just clarification on the amount of the $52,760. Is that the amount we would pay, or is that the amount prior to the division of everybody else paying their part?
Through the Mayor to Councillor, that is the total amount of the proposal from Watt Consulting Group. So it would be split after that between the funding partners based on.
So approximately 21,000,
yeah.
somewhere in that range?
Yeah, the actual distribution between the Victoria Airport Authority and in Sydney, it's not clear. The Victoria Airport Authority have definitely indicated they'd be partners in sharing with the study, but what percentage of that wasn't defined in their offer.
Okay. Oh, but it's definitely way below the 60,000 we budgeted for it, though. So
that's correct. Yeah,
great.
And the town's cost, yes.
Thanks very much.
If I could have clarification through staff, when the budget amount of 60,000 was set and we shared that information with the VAA in North Saanich, was the split not agreed upon 30,000 Sydney, 30,000 Airport Authority, and 10,000 North Saanich?
We'd have to go back and check the details, but we believe that there was verbal confirmation. We were just talking about it today, and I don't know if that's indicated in writing, but there was verbal confirmation with respect to that, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you for clarifying, but we were in meetings that we had with those parties. We were in that neighborhood. We have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We'll move to item 13F, which is the RFP award regarding Rathdown Park playground equipment supply and install, and I might turn to staff for a brief introduction.
To council. So the Rathdown Park playground was identified in the Parks Master Plan as something that needs to be replaced. Recently, through playground inspection, it's been found to not meet CSA standards. So the playground's actually currently closed, the existing playground. And so we went through an RFP process, and we received several competitive bids. And we reviewed them, and we are recommending to award to Park and Play Design Number 1, which is included in the package.
Thank you. Councillor Rintoul.
Mr. Mayor, is it okay to ask questions of this item now, or do you want to wait until there's a motion?
Absolutely, if you have questions for staff. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Clary. And with respect to the ranking that's come out here, certainly appears, and the commentary in the staff report suggests it was a very, very close, I guess, position between two of these companies, Park and Play Design, as well as Green Roots Play Equipment, which I recognize as a local peninsula company. And so when I look at your comments that the proposals were all very competitive, the scores of the top two, Park and Play Design and Green Roots Play Equipment, were very close. Can you elaborate somewhat on sort of that selection and scoring process? Because I will acknowledge that I'm more comfortable leaning towards Green Roots, given how tight these quotes are, unless you were going to tell me that it came down to a bunch more money for one, and that's where those 2-point difference were made up in terms of the evaluation.
So all of the proposals were very competitive. There was some correspondence sent today, just kind of outlining some of the differences and why we went with Park and Play over Green Routes. So Park and Play hasn't installed very many as much equipment around as Green Routes, so we went and inspected some equipment that was installed in View Royal a couple years ago. So we did go check that out. There was some, the installation of the actual zip line wasn't done properly, so there was some wear that shouldn't have been there. But besides that, the playground itself was very good quality, so staff did look at that, and if the zip line is installed properly, it should be a great zip line. We also called references of the actual installer, who is based in the Lower Mainland, over on, I think, in Maple Ridge. He got very good reviews, and so we feel very comfortable moving forward with him. The Park and Play, although they're based out of Alberta, they also they're breaking into the Vancouver or the BC market. So they do have a project manager that's based in the Metro Vancouver area, and they got very good reviews from the people in Alberta. The 2 to 5 year old play structure that they presented was unique and had a very high play value, which we factored fairly highly because of the amount of daycares that use the park on a regular basis. The zip line also includes a ramp up the front and then stairs up the back, so that you could access it from both ways, whereas the Green Route zip line had kind of a cool climbing structure, but we thought it was a climbing rope structure. It would be much more challenging for a lot of kids who might not be as physically able to actually use that structure. So that was factored into the decision. And also, I just want to point out that Green Routes, they are a local supplier of Henderson Equipment, who actually is a manufacturer in Ontario. So, over half the cost of this is going to the equipment cost, which would be not local anyways. And there's additional information about interprovincial trade agreements, and that shouldn't really be, factored into our decision making for this. It was a competitive process. There was 3 of us plus the playground installer that reviewed them. So,
Councillor?
Thank you. When did this item go to RFP? In terms of when the town submitted the RFP?
it closed June 30th, so I think it went out 2.5 weeks before that.
Okay, so recently, and
Yes.
one of the, could you clarify for me, because I'm not sure I understood, the Park and Play design, their equipment is manufactured where? I know it's an Alberta installer or company, but it's manufactured where?
I would have to confirm that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, I appreciate, I know both myself and Councillor Keith had some questions in advance with respect to this item. I appreciate your comments. For me, Mr. Mayor and colleagues and council, I guess one of the things I struggle with is looking, personally to try and buy local as much as possible, and see that certainly as an approach we're seeing from the SBIA in terms of promoting local, and perhaps there's some procurement concerns that should be reiterated from staff, because in my mind, the two scores are close. Staff are recommending, one option, but we've got a 0.2 is the difference between the two, and I'm not super comfortable, licking that stamp and sending that check to elsewhere. Thank you.
I'll turn to Councillor Garnett and Councillor O'Keefe. Thank you, Ms. Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I like your point about the 2 to 5 year olds. I'm pretty familiar with that area, and there are a lot of young daycare children that use it. So that aspect of the playground is pretty important for that particular neighborhood. So I like staff's thoughts towards that in particular. Just curious though, I was looking through all the diagrams and pictures, and maybe it's in there and I just didn't find it, but what particular surface are they planning on using under the playground equipment? I couldn't find that anywhere.
They're using an engineered wood chip base, and that was specified in the RFP. So all submittals had the same wood chip base.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe, then Councillor Fallot.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what stood out for me was I asked staff a couple questions that we got responses on emails, and I was encouraged that out of the top 10 playground elements that were identified by residents in the area, that both proposals cover all 10 playground elements, so that's good. And I asked whether the playgrounds were suitable for children with physical mobility issues, and they said that both proposals incorporate those things, so that's encouraging. I'm presuming the cost is relatively the same, I'm not sure. And as Councillor Rintoul pointed out, there's a very small difference. It's less than, it's 0.5, I think, is the difference between the two bids. So again, I would be inclined to support more local. If there's a legal reason why we can't do that, that would be good for us to know. And if that is the case, whether we want to make any adjustments to our procurement policy in the future so that we can encourage more local procurement to support our local economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to turn to Mr. Hissick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are the province's signatory to the New West Trade Partnership Agreement with Western Canada, and interprovincial trade agreements require open and transparent procurement without preference to a supplier's particular geographic location. We are not allowed to discriminate based on local. It's a wonderful initiative when you go shopping, not so much when you put out a tender or other procurement process where you have a certain threshold, and above that you have to follow the rules. That's what we're up against here.
Thanks, Mr. Hissick. I'll turn to Councillor, I'm going to turn to Councillor Rintoul, who I think has a question from what Mr. Hissick said, and then I'll turn to Councillor Fallot.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to follow up, Mr. Hissick, you referenced this being applicable in a certain threshold. Is that the dollar value of the project? Is it the volume of the municipalities purchasing? Is this trans-provincial agreement subject to provincial purchasing and as well it dictates municipal purchasing policies?
It's we're talking about a dollar threshold here, 75,000 for goods and 75,000 for services. So in both cases, we are above that threshold. And while there is some argument that municipalities can't always be bound by agreements signed between provinces, I think the general procedure for fairness is that we do follow those.
Supplemental to Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm uncertain, I'm not expecting staff to have the answer to this, but the contract as awarded, or sorry, as recommended to be awarded, the value was for $149,986, including taxes. So, if you're saying $75K for goods, $75K for services, I don't know what the split was on the RFP from Green Roots to know whether or not, they're beneath that $150K combined total, or 75 and 75. But I'm assuming staff looked at that in the context of your answer, Mr. Hissick. Can't hear you, sorry.
Yes, we did, Councillor. We treated this like a procurement above 75,000, whether you looked at it as materials or services, and in truth, it was a combination of the two.
Thank you, Mr. Hissick. I'll turn to Councillor Fallot.
Thank you very much. So a question through you to staff, if I may, and it goes back to something that both Councillor Garnett and I think Councillor O'Keefe spoke to, and that's accessibility. And staff, I believe, mentioned that the base surface would be wood chips. And from my research that I've done with a number of people who are using mobility aids such as electric wheelchairs, etc., they find that getting off of the hard surface that has the artificial turf, I'm speaking of Tallista Park right now, getting from that hard surface onto the wood chip and getting back up again, the wood chips compact, and although it creates a reasonably hard surface, or firm, let's put it firm surface, for motorized wheelchairs, etc., to move across, getting back again without having somebody help them is difficult. So when I was looking at the photographs in the proposal, it appeared to be artificial turf, and I was, no, I guess not. It wasn't clear what the surface is, and I do have some concerns between the transition between where the play equipment is and where the rest of the park area. If staff would comment on that, please.
Through the mayor to Councillor Fallett. Part of the issue with not going with engineered wood chip is a rubberized surface is much more expensive, and then the majority of your playground budget would therefore go to the rubberized surface and not have as much play value. So this is kind of the best of both worlds is what we're kind of trying to go for with this. And they're not just normal wood chips, they are engineered wood chips, which act differently than normal wood chips.
So if I can continue on that, are the engineered wood chips different than what is at Tallista, or is it the same product that's at Tallista?
Tallista has engineered wood chips as well.
Okay, so for me, the message, and I remember this goes back to the previous term, was to ensure that we have an accessible playground. And I understand budget, but I don't want us to create a vision of an accessible playground that isn't fully accessible. I have some difficulty. I was very excited with what is being proposed here, and especially the companion swing. I remember looking at that way back in 2014, 2015, about wanting to get a companion swing, and I know that they have a high price tag. But I am concerned about the base and whether or not that is fully accessible for all people. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll ask a question, or follow with a question to staff. Would you be able, and perhaps not this evening, to give an approximate cost differential? You talked about that surface being, a rubberized surface being fairly expensive.
We can look into that, yes.
Thank you. I see two hands, Councillor O'Keefe, then Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, just want to quickly echo Councillor Fallett's comments about the surface, and that was a concern to me as well. So I'd be interested in the costs. And as she said, you know, if there's going to be a cost to make our facilities, you know, appropriate and accessible to everybody, I think that that's a good investment to make. So I also would like to see some additional costs to incorporate that. Thank you.
Sir, Councillor Duncan.
Thanks. So the conference I was at, where I went to a workshop on playgrounds and climate change. One of the key findings they had was that with climate change and the increase in heating degree days, playgrounds basically become unlivable, particularly those that use the rubberized surface. It retains the heat. So unless the municipality is then invested in quite a lot of shading structure by making it inclusive for a few kids in the motorized wheelchairs, they made it impossible for anyone to safely use without additional structures. So I'm wondering if there's a way we could instead perhaps get the contractor to look at the way the wood chips shift, if there are substructures that they can put in, particularly around where surfaces change, or something to prevent that shifting, but still allow the shifting over for fall protection closer to the other structures. Because I feel that the compromise between having a firm surface for motorized chairs and the legally required shifting surface for fall protection ends up making one that makes the playground not very good. So I'm just hoping that we could find something else that would not require them to change the surface throughout, but that would perhaps address some of that issue with the transition zone specifically.
Through the mayor to Councillor Duncan, we can look into that.
Councillor Fellett.
Oh, thank you. And Councillor Duncan raises an important issue. And I appreciate that input. I think where I'm looking at with Tallista is because there's sort of a T-zone that is the pathway, and then going off of that into the playground area, that's where the difficulty is. If this playground at Resthaven is a large playground area that has a consistent surface, and then that we create ramps, perhaps we're only talking probably about 1 inch to 2 inch, or 2.5 to 5 centimeters. If we have that transition ramping to ensure that if someone is in a mobility aid, that because one of the things that is really important is to respect the individual being independent. So if you have someone in a mobility aid, they don't want to have to, hey, can you help me? They want to be able to and need to be able to do this on their own. So perhaps that's the answer to doing where the difference is. So thank you for addressing that, Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Councillor. So we do have a motion on the floor. Sorry? Oh, sorry, those were questions. I'm sorry, I read the motion twice while I was listening. And so if there's not further questions of staff, I would look to have a motion on the floor.
I'll move that the contract for the Resthaven Park Playground Equipment Supply and Install be awarded to Park and Play Design.
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? We have 2 opposed. The motion carries. Thank you for that fulsome discussion. We'll turn to item 13G, which is the MOU regarding renovations at the Sydney North Saanich Library. Report from staff dated July 9th.
I'll move the recommendation that the Memorandum of Understanding with Vancouver Island Library Board regarding the repayment of funds owing by the town for upgrades to the Nell Horth Room in conjunction with the recent renovations to the Sydney North Saanich Library branch be approved.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Turn to item 13H, which is changes to the RCMP capital plan. A report from staff dated July 13th.
I'll move the recommendation that the RCMP secure parking lot project be added to the 2020 capital plan at $55,000, with the project to be funded through the deferral of the RCMP windows and garage door projects, as well as savings from the staff entry door project.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, I'll...
Mr. Mayor,
sorry, turn to Mr. Humble.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out, Mr. Mayor, it's indicated, I believe in the report somewhere, that what is being suggested is and budgeted for is an 8-foot chain link fence. So under our zoning bylaw, an 8-foot fence isn't permitted. The maximum height is 6-foot fence. So subsequently, if an 8-foot fence is deemed desirable, and it's certainly deemed desirable by the RCMP, they've indicated that that a 6-foot fence, if an 8-foot fence isn't going to work, that they could live with it. But we're just going to confirm with them. Indeed, an 8-foot fence, we would come forward for a variance application for council's consideration. So I just wanted to advise, indicate that up front, that if it is going to be an 8-foot, we'll bring forward a variance application.
Thank you for drawing our attention to that, Mr. Humble. So we do have a motion. I just wanted to make the comment. I appreciate and thank staff for bringing this forward. It's a tangible improvement for our CP detachment. And while I know we have many, many priorities and we're playing catch up in the times of COVID, that this come forward at this time. I'll call a question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. I'll turn to item 13I, which is the Ray Creek Dam renovation report from staff dated July 15th.
Move the recommendation that council authorize staff to enter into a time and materials unit rate contract with QM Environmental for the renovation of Ray Creek Dam.
Second.
Discussion. I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul and Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll acknowledge that time and material unit rate contract certainly makes me nervous. I will also acknowledge that I understand the efficiencies that are proposed in the report with respect to being able to undertake this work simultaneous with the other dewatering project and some of the synergies that are there between the two. And as such, I feel like this is probably most practical given the very tight timeline to move forward with this. If I may, through to staff, ask if the town has much experience sort of monitoring and managing time and materials contract versus what we normally do when we put projects out to tender and come up with fixed price jobs.
I'll turn to staff. Ms. Clary?
Through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul. So KWL will be the contract administrators on the construction project, and they're familiar with it. So we'll be leaning on them quite a bit for this.
Thank you, Ms. Clary. And perhaps this is more of a historical question than is fair to ask Ms. Clary, in that she's fairly new to the community. What have we got a history of this type of contract, if I may, through the mayor to either Mr. Hissick or Mr. Humble?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not aware of any large project that was undertaken on a T&M basis.
And in that Mr. Hissick's name isn't signed on the report, I guess, if I may, through the mayor to Mr. Hissick, are you comfortable with the report as proposed then in this manner?
Councillor, yes, on the basis that a budget was estimated by KWL as part of their design, and it is below what we expected as the worst case, and the fact that this is a fairly short timeline for getting the work done, and therefore a fairly short timeline for cost escalation, I am comfortable in signing off on this.
Thank you, Mr. Hissick.
Thank you, Councillor. I turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some time ago, we had discussions about having a list of shovel-ready projects available for infrastructure or other grants or funding that might become available. And I believe staff indicated that this project might qualify for that sort of thing. So I'm wondering if staff are still looking into that, and if so, do they require a resolution or direction from council in order to pursue grant funding for this particular project?
I'll turn to Mr. Hissick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor O'Keefe, we would not be applying for a grant for this project because we do need to get going on it. There are other projects, however, that we could put forward for a potential grant later. The stipulation with grants is that you do not start until it's awarded. So if we get going on this, it would no longer be eligible. But we deem it's more important to get it done than to hold it up for a grant.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll turn to item 13J, which is the UBCM Community Excellence Award application, report dated July 14th.
I'll move the recommendation that council see merit in the town submission for the UBCM Community Excellence Awards Program under the category of excellence in service delivery for the work done by the town's Emergency Operations Center in pandemic response and recovery.
Second.
Any discussion? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm very supportive of this application, as I'm sure most of council are. And you commented earlier in your comments about the work that the EOC has done, and also the Chamber and the SBIA. And I was just going to suggest to staff, if they think it's appropriate, in their submission to maybe highlight the very important role that both the Chamber and the SBIA had in these initiatives. And I think it's a really good example of the spirit of partnership and collaboration that I believe UBCM is looking for in these sorts of things. As we know, the Chamber, Denny Warner from the Chamber initiated and spearheaded, I believe, the iPads to care homes. They were involved in setting up the truck stop. The Chamber played a major role in developing the survey of businesses and conducting hundreds of interviews. The SBIA did a great job at gathering info on resources available to support business and providing advice to them, putting a list together of business openings and closures, and have since launched a Shop Local campaign. And I think kudos also to our EOC director, who recognized the importance of bringing them into the EOC in the first place. And also kudos to the board of directors for the SBIA and the Chamber for allowing their staff to put their regular work on the back burner, so to speak, while they attended to the needs of the greater community. So just a suggestion perhaps to staff, if they might want to provide some additional comments with the submission, to comment on that spirit of partnership and community collaboration that I think is really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for that input. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We're going to turn to 13K, the monthly building permit report for June.
Move receipt for information.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now turn to correspondence, and we have 4 items. We have the 14A, which is a request for support for modular housing and federal government funding, a letter from the City of Victoria dated June 22nd.
I move the recommendation that staff provide a written response regarding homeless housing challenges in Sydney.
Okay, if I might just comment, and please bear with me while I get to that report. At the end of the letter provided by the City of Victoria, or Council of City of Victoria, there was 2 specific requests. Whether Council could pass a motion supporting in principle the addition of modular housing with supports to our housing stock, and signaling to the province that our local government is a willing partner in addressing the regional challenges of homelessness. And the second, if Council could pass a motion calling on the federal government to match provincial funding for modular housing units. And so while with our housing needs assessment or other information, we could certainly respond to the recommendation you've made, I would like Council to consider those recommendations as well. Sorry, we did have a mover and a seconder on. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second for discussion.
Moved and seconded. Did you wish to motivate Councillor Garnett? Okay. Other discussion from staff, or from colleagues? Yeah, I'll just comment that I'm not sure provide a written response. We can certainly provide a copy of the challenges, and I would like to add at this time that Council will recall the circulation of the memo that was received from VHA and Victoria Coalition for the Homelessness after the EOC and staff spent a number of months trying to secure temporary housing with the support of BC Housing. All of the appropriate agencies were involved in those lengthy discussions, and in the end, it was the lack of wraparound support services that did not move it forward. And I have forwarded that recently, the end of last week, forwarded that letter that summarized the situation in Sydney during the pandemic to Mayor Lisa Helps, to Mayor Jeff Orr, and to Mayor David Screech of View Royal, who are the three mayors who represent the three areas of the region on the board of the Victoria Coalition for the Homelessness. And they have indicated that they would try to reach out through the work that they do with regards to further information on providing supports, wraparound supports to housing. The reason I support this is because it's come to a situation where the CRD earlier this year asked local governments, it was early last year, I believe it was, asked local governments in the region to consider providing land for modular housing. And of course, Sydney was not in a situation to offer that. And the situation in the province's determination is that this is still of paramount concern to the province, and it's a situation now where BC Housing is willing to actually invest in either private land or municipal land to try to create this type of supportive housing. This is not approving the two motions or requests that the City of Victoria made is not giving blanket approval to any modular housing in our municipality. It's indicating that we would be supportive of what the province is trying to do and willing to consider proposals that might come forward in the future. I might add that there's been a lot of discussion about modular housing, and I was directed to a project that happened on Blanchard on Hillside near Blanchard. And when I saw the project, I was reminded actually of the Travel Lodge here in Sydney, which some 10 to 12 years ago went from being a two-story building to a four-story building by a rather rapid construction of modular construction. And I don't think anybody going by today who isn't in the construction industry would necessarily know that that was actually modular construction. And so the province is moving forward with a preference for modular construction given the speed of construction that can occur versus traditional. So I'll leave my comments there with this motion on the floor and look to my colleagues for any further comment. Councillor Duncan.
Sorry, so is it your intent that we would make this motion and then address each of those requests as subsequent motions, or whether we would want to make sure that we specify our answer to these specific requests in the letter that is part of that kind of?
I would see the recommendation that is on the floor that the information and perhaps other information staff could add to from that experience working with multiple agencies would be helpful to go forward in addition to the other motions if council were to go in that direction. I think we need, there's tangible evidence of the challenges Sydney faced while trying to deal with this challenge, and I think that report or any additions that staff might have could go if council sees support to the other two recommendations that I've brought attention to. I'll call the question and there's no further discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed. The motion carries unanimous. Do I see any appetite for the other motions? Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll move that council supports in principle the addition of modular housing with supports to our local housing stock, and that council call on the federal government to match provincial funding for modular housing units.
Second.
Further discussion? I think I've motivated enough to this point. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? I have one opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We'll now turn to item 14B, alcohol consumption during the pandemic, a letter from Island Health dated July 13th.
Move receipt for information.
Any discussion? Call a question. All those in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. I'll turn to item 14C, impact of the pandemic and revised plans, a letter from, the letter from Artsy dated July 8th, a recommendation to receive for information.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. I requested that this be placed out of correspondence for information into correspondence to speak to it at the time, not knowing that that Councillor Fallett, as the liaison, would speak to it in the manner that she did. So I have no further comment other than to applaud Artsy for the quality of the report and addressing their resilience and plans going forward. I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll now turn to item 14D, which was raised by Councillor Duncan, 14.8. As item 14D, we are raising correspondence for information item 16.8, a letter from D English and W English regarding bird-friendly building design, received on July 3rd. Councillor Duncan, would you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you. So I just wanted to bring this one out because we are going through our OCP review, and some of the things we've already heard from stakeholder groups and sort of like Councillor Wainwright has brought up before is the idea of actually looking more carefully at our environmentally sensitive areas and what that means. We know we have, a group of the Roberts Bay Migratory Bird Sanctuary has a neighborhood group. And so I thought this might be a time to just pull this one out. And if we could make sure it's on the OCP advisory committees and staff's radar for looking at that as we're looking at just changing our form and character requirements. I had a couple of questions for the staff, and I don't know if they'd had a chance to look at them before our meeting. Because the letter writer mentions that, it has no additional cost if incorporated at the design stage. And it's all very simple stuff. And so I'm just wondering if we have an idea of whether that's a cost thing or if this would be something simple we can adapt another city's bird strike or lighting guidelines in there during our OCP process, if that's something that came up.
Questions through to staff. Thank you.
Sure. Through the mayor to Councillor Duncan. To my knowledge, we haven't used sort of bird-friendly design in Sydney to this point. We're sort of familiar with the concept, but we don't have a lot of detailed information on it. My sense is that it wouldn't be a significant difference in terms of single-family residential type of construction. It may reduce cost, in fact. Contemporary construction tends toward more glass. And what we're seeing recently is larger windows, but also glass railings, railless glass railings in front of the windows, which increase the view, obviously, but also increase the amount of glass in the building. So potentially it could be a reduction in that, but it's certainly an excellent suggestion to look into for the OCP. A lot of excellent suggestions for that tonight. Thank you. And we're definitely interested in taking a closer look at it. So it's on the list to research further.
Great. I don't think staff's heard, and it's out there now for the public to get a hold of and think of as well if that's in their interest. So I don't think I need to make a motion with that. So thanks for the discussion, staff.
Thank you. If we could just have a motion to receive, Councillor.
So moved.
We have it moved and seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. We have no new business. We'll turn to the remaining items under 16, correspondence for information.
Move receipt for information.
Second.
All those in favor? Sorry, all those in favor? Motion carries. We have no notices of motion. We no longer require a motion to go on camera, so I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening. Thank you to staff as well.